Mr. Commissioner Guidry, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have the roll call?
Jerry Smith,
Present.
Joe McPherson,
Here.
Andrew Blanchard,
Here.
Dusty Guidry,
Here.
Bill Hogan,
Here.
Gene Reynolds,
Here.
Allison Terry,
Here.
Madam Chair, there are 7 commissioners in attendance. We have a quorum. Secretary Monse is also present.
Thank you. We have the adoption of the March 4th, 2021 commission meetings. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So moved. We have the agenda for today. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Guidry,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sinceri. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Do we have any special announcements today?
Madam Chair, I have one.
Do that first.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to do this announcement if that's all right with you.
That's absolutely fine, Mr.
I'd like
Secretary.
I'd like to introduce our newest commission member who was appointed by the governor on March 20th, Mr. Gene Reynolds. Gene and I served in the legislature before, just like Commissioner McPherson and I did for years. He's an avid hunter and an avid offshore fisherman, and certainly we'd like to welcome him to our commission because I know he's going to be a great addition to our commission here, and especially helping the department because he understands a lot of the issues that we're faced with. And before he was actually sworn in, he even volunteered Commissioner McPherson to help us with our licensing restructure in the legislature. And God knows we need all the help we can get there. So Gene, welcome to the commission. I know you're going to be a heck of an asset to us, and we certainly look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. My greatest thing, though, that I've done in my life is been a teacher. And the legislature was fine, but the best thing that I ever did was being a teacher of junior high and high school. And back in those, and I bring that up because back in those days when I was teaching science, I employed or worked with partners with Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries on many trips for our kids to go. North Louisiana kids go through their whole life and never see the Gulf. And so we take trips, and with the Wildlife and Fisheries, they come down and help us out and do programs down at the beach and different areas. So I've always respected and looked up to the Wildlife and Fisheries and what they do and how they do it in the state. And so it's an honor and a privilege to be here today and work. And I look forward to working with my fellow commissioners going forward to make this the best it can be. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to give you guys a quick update. If you recall back in November, when you guys discussed the Menhaden issue, what came at the end of that meeting or that topic was some instructions to the department to work with both sides to try to find some resolution, try to find some compromise. And I just want to make sure that you guys knew that we had been working on that situation. We had a couple of meetings here at the department, and I tried to work on some resolution. And then actually some legislators stepped in and tried to do the same thing. And so we've been actively working with them and both sides on this issue. I just wanted y'all to know that we haven't not done what you asked us to do, that we're actively working on that. I don't exactly know that a compromise has quite yet been reached. A tentative one was somewhat reached last week between people who met in Thibodaux, legislators, and then on both sides. I don't know whether that will be codified through the legislature, but we did put together some apps showing that tentative compromise. If you guys want to take a look at it, and you guys may decide to give us some instruction on bringing that to you for a formal presentation at the next meeting. So I just wanted to make you aware of where we stand in case y'all wanted to hear more about that at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. You what?
Do you have that map available today?
I do, in case y'all wanted to take a look at it today. I know we have, because it's not an agenda item, we have limited ability to talk too much about it, but if y'all wanted to see those maps that were tentatively agreed to at that meeting in Thibodeau last week, I can show it to you briefly in case y'all wanted to direct us to bring something next month.
Well, we're on special privilege, so I can talk all I want.
Well, I probably defer to Cole on that.
I would like to see the map because I'd like to get it out there to let the general public as well as those interested parties that were involved in those discussions. And you mentioned the legislature. I think that we've always recognized that it's our authority that should be looking at these issues and regulating the natural resources of the state. And one of the things that I feel comfortable at this point, this is not a resource issue near as much as it is a user conflict issue. And so I'm gonna ask the department to bring forth an NOI to start the public discussion process, give everyone that's interested in the issue to be able, through that NOI process, to be able to have input, and us go ahead and do what our constitutional authority is and try to regulate that industry, including the user conflict aspect of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner. We will prepare an NOI that reflects what we understood to be sort of a tentative agreement at this meeting last week. Again, that was just of the folks who were there. I know several of the folks from some of the fishing advocacy groups needed to go back and talk to their membership. So I don't know whether this is going to be something their larger membership will agree to, but hopefully through the NOI process, we'll understand that.
Madam Chair, at the risk of stepping on Commissioner McPherson's toes during personal privilege, it does sound like we're getting into a pretty substantive, at least receipt of information here. And I think it may be appropriate, just to cover our bases, to amend the agenda to add this as an agenda item. I do know it's a charged issue, and I'd hate to procedurally not proceed in a cautious manner.
So will you
To
yield
keep
the, will you
keep the
yield?
executive council happy, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion to amend the agenda. Do I have it to discuss the Menhaden fishing limits? Do I have a second? Do I have a?
I'll second it.
I have a second from Commissioner Sinceri. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Joe McPherson,
Yes.
Andrew Blanchard,
Yes.
Dusty Guidry,
Yes.
Bill Hogan,
Yes.
Gene Reynolds,
Yes.
Allison Terry,
Yes.
Madam Chair, we have a unanimous.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, well,
Banks.
we're gonna do that now, or we're gonna just put it on the agenda
I-
after?
I would,
After privilege.
This is, I appreciate what Cole said, is just to allow Patrick to be able to give us this information. And then there's no action matter, as I appreciate this. This is just me as a commissioner requesting an NOI to be presented next month
I-
that would
I
be
think-
an action item.
well, requesting one is an action item, but I think now that it's on the agenda, we can't.
Yes, so I guess we're still in personal privilege. If you wanted to establish this as a new agenda item number 7, to hear it next, I don't know if there's any other personal privilege. We could probably,
I think there is, but let's go ahead, if you don't mind, Mr. Banks, let's go ahead with personal privilege, then we'll take this up. Is that okay, Commissioner McPherson? All right. Any other? Yes, Mr. Commissioner Sinceri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, and members of the audience. I'd like to take this time to recognize a good friend of our families, Mr. John Ray Nelson, who passed away on March 11th of this past month, and offer his family our condolences. Mr. John Ray was an icon of the seafood industry and an important buyer of Louisiana seafoods for over 80 years. and a very close friend of the Sinceri family. Mr. John Ray was a third-generation owner of Bon Secour Fisheries in Bon Secour, Alabama. And under Mr. John Ray's tenure, he established one of the largest oyster, shrimp, and fish processing and distribution businesses in the Gulf South. His business bought, processed, and distributed literally billions of pounds of Louisiana seafoods and shipped them across America. Mr. John Ray was a member of the Oyster Institute of North America and a longtime member of the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. Through Mr. John Ray's leadership, he was able to draw attention to the importance of Louisiana and the Gulf seafood as a natural, healthy, fresh food source for consumers. And because of his relationship with my father, Sal Sinceri, and I was able to get to know Mr. John Ray well and continue his tradition as a leader in the Louisiana and Gulf State seafood industry, along with his son, one of my best friends, Chris Nelson. Thank you, and if we could take just a short moment of silence in his memory. Thank you.
Any other items of, yes,
Commissioner.
Commissioner Blanchard.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. As everyone knows, I'm now Vice Chairman on the Louisiana Shrimp Task Force. And yesterday we had a lengthy meeting on the task force. And out of that meeting, NOAA announced that we will have a delay on shrimp heads put in 40-foot trawlers in Louisiana state waters, and they extended that to August the 1st. And what the Shrimp Task Force would like from this commission is just maybe a letter of support, supporting that, going to NOAA, just saying that TEDS is not a good thing for coastal Louisiana without marshlands. That we don't have no sandy bottoms, just the marshland. They really don't work that well, off the coast, and it's going to be a conflict to our local fishermen right there. But Colt can give us some update. He was in on the lengthy meeting yesterday. He can, kind of give us a little update on it if he could.
Sure, and I might have to rely on Assistant Secretary Banks on this, but as I appreciate it, NOAA Fisheries did delay the implementation date requiring turtle excluder devices and skimmers that are 40 foot and over. That is a Gulf-wide mandate. It was scheduled to come into effect in March, and they delayed that until August. My understanding is there's not enough of these turtle excluder devices available to make everybody compliant with the law. In addition to that, NOAA at least indicated that they may do away with the exclusion for 40-foot vessels and under and apply it to the entire fishery fleet. And so that would be them taking additional action to amend their own rule. So we'll look for that to happen in August too. Obviously, there's some concerns on how that will affect Louisiana's shrimp fleet. And again, I'll echo that, at least to me and to our fisheries guys, not to speak on behalf of Patrick, but we don't think that the turtle interaction is such that it requires TEDs, that tow times are not sufficient in Louisiana. So with that said, he did make a request. The Shrimp Task Force did want the commission to write a letter. That's something we can put on the agenda for next month, and we can have a draft for your review.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items in personal privilege? Any other announcements?
Only procedurally, we have unanimously added an agenda item. Y'all had already adopted the commission agenda in number 5. I just wanted to, for the record, note that after that took place, we added the agenda item. I don't believe there's any other action you need to do. I think the unanimous addition of that after you've ratified the agenda is fine. Just wanted to make that note for the record.
Thank you. And let's just go ahead and get our enforcement report done. Major Skina.
Morning, Madam Chairman, members of the
Good morning.
commission. For the month of March, we had 7 boating incidents, 4 injuries, 1 fatality, 672 written citations, 155 written warnings, and 34 public assists. I have a synopsis of some cases that were made last month, as usual. Enforcement agents cited 2 men in Terrebonne Parish for unlawfully taking oysters off of a private lease and failure to have written permission. Agents responded to a complaint of illegal oyster harvesting in Bayou Severance and made contact with 2 subjects who did not have permission to be on the lease. 3 sacks of oysters were seized and returned to the water, and the vessel and dredge were seized under department seizure form. In addition to the criminal fines and possible incarceration, the subjects face oyster harvester license revocation by the department upon conviction. A Chalmette man was arrested in St. Bernard Parish for operating a boat while intoxicated with child endangerment and failure to comply with PFD requirements. An agent was on patrol in Hopedale when he observed the subject operating a vessel near the Wyclosky Bridge with 3 minors on board who were not wearing the required PFDs while the vessel was underway. The subject was also operating the vessel in a careless manner. After performing poorly on a standardized field sobriety test, the subject was arrested and subsequently failed a breath alcohol analysis test. The subject was booked in the St. Bernard Parish Jail. An enforcement agent arrested a Buras man in Plaquemine Parish for theft of crab traps, destruction of crab traps or removal of contents, and illegal possession of stolen things. Agents received information that the subject had stolen numerous crab traps and was keeping them at his residence. Upon execution of a search warrant obtained for the property, agents located numerous crab traps that belonged to the initial complainant. Additionally, agents also discovered crab traps belonging to 18 other fishermen that were stored on the property and were able to confirm that those traps were stolen as well. In total, 60 traps were seized from the subject. Madam, this concludes the enforcement report.
Thank you, Major.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, Major Skinner, let me just thank you for the breakdown on the tagging cases that you made here. I appreciate y'all going back and looking at that.
I will pass that on to the chief, sir.
Yeah, and also the responsiveness y'all shown me in trying to get this report in a more friendly format. And I appreciate your responsiveness.
Yes, sir.
All right. New item regarding the Menhaden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any kind of formal presentation. This is a little bit off the cuff, but I do have at least the maps that we prepared based on our involvement in the meeting last week. And so you can't really see very much of it in this statewide map, but I wanted to at least show you right now a few items on the map because they're going to be consistent through all of the other maps as well. So we're showing the 3 mile line, which is that white line out as far south as you can see. And then the red line that you see is what we call our inside outside line. And it's really, that line was established for the purpose of shrimp, but it essentially sets our coastline in rule. Actually in law. And then, so those are the 2 main reference points. What you can't see very well are some of the lighter shades of pink, except for that area around Grand Island. I'll zoom into that in a little while. And that shows some of the buffers that were discussed at that meeting last week and have been discussed. We've been discussing buffers at all of those meetings that you guys instructed us to hold. So we'll start in the west from the Texas state line through the Cameron area. This map shows the 3 mile line, but it also shows some bathymetry information, which makes it a little bit busy, but it was helpful during the discussions at these meetings. But again, the red line along the coastline is that shrimp inside outside line. The pink area was as what we appreciate the discussion centered on a 1/4 mile buffer off of the coast to restrict commercial menhaden harvest to 1/4 mile off of the coast in this area. Moving to the east, the Cameron area shows that pink area, which is the 1/4 mile. And I did confirm with the staff that this is a 1/4 land mile, so not nautical miles. Then over in the Vermilion area, 1/4 mile off of that inside-outside line. And then this is where the information starts to get a little bit different. You see the 1/4 mile off of Terrebonne as you work your way east until we get to the Fouchon area or Bell Pass, which is, as I appreciated from the discussion last week, the staff reported to me that what was agreed to or tentatively agreed to, I'm sorry, very tentative, a 1 mile buffer from Fouchon, basically off of that Elmer's Island area. As you recall, back in November, we had a lot of discussion about fishing, menhaden fishing and recreational fishing off of the Elmer's Island area. And so the menhaden groups agreed to a 1 mile buffer off of Elmer's Island. So if you move to the east from there, you can still see the Elmer's Island there on the extreme left of your map. What was agreed to, as I appreciate it, was the gentleman's agreement that was already in place with the menhaden community and the town of Grand Isle for 3 miles off of Grand Isle. And then moving to the east onto West Grand Terre Island, a 1 mile buffer off of West Grand Terre Island. And then from there, the 1/4 mile agreement picks up from there around to the east. And the last map I'll show you is that large area of Chandeleur Sound and Breton Sound. As you recall, our inside-outside line actually runs to the east of that on the outside of the Chandeleur Islands. However, for the purposes of menhaden fishing, they have been by law able to fish in these sounds inside of our inside-outside line. That's the only place in Louisiana where they're allowed to come, quote, inside the inside-outside line, but they must stay seaward of what we call the double rig line, which is the yellow line depicted in this map. So that 1/4 mile buffer would also keep them off of that double rig line as well. So they would still be able to fish in those big, large sounds, which is technically inside of the inside-outside line, but then seaward of that double rig line. And that's, as we appreciated it from the discussion last week, what was tentatively agreed to by the folks at that meeting, not necessarily the larger groups that those folks represent. So with that, I'll try to answer some questions.
Commissioner McPherson.
Put that slide back up, please.
That last one?
Yeah. So currently, they're not allowed to fish inside of the yellow line.
That's correct.
So they're being moved out basically miles there.
No, sir. In this case, the 1/4 mile buffer would apply to the double rig line, the yellow line. And so they could fish in that open area between the 1/4 mile buffer off of the double rig line, which is the yellow line, out to the Chandeleur Islands.
Okay, I'm still not following you. You got a yellow line there and a red line there. I thought you said the yellow line is where they could fish to currently.
That's correct.
And now they would be outside of the red line?
No, sir. They would be, in this case, they have a buffer on 2 lines in this case. They have a buffer off of the red line. But then as you move past the red line into the sounds going to the west, you can fish inside there. And they can fish all the way to a 1/4 mile off of the yellow line, which is the double rig line. So it maintains their ability to fish inside of the inside-outside line in this particular area. But the buffer applies to the double rig line, which they currently don't have a buffer on that double rig line right now.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes, Commissioner Sinceri?
Just a question about the people in attendance at this meeting, these meetings, where there was tentative agreements made. Would you think that if you were to tell, could you tell us, are it representative of the user groups that may be impacted one way or the other?
Well, I would expect so. It was the same user groups that came and gave testimony to you guys back in November. So, I can't say it's representative of every user out there, but certainly the groups that have been in front of you all to give testimony before were represented at that meeting and have been represented at all of those meetings we've been at. They've been very good. Both sides have been very good about showing up to a lot of meetings since you all gave us that instruction. So both sides have been extremely engaged, and we are very appreciative of that because we feel like we've gotten a lot of very good input from both sides.
That sounds really good. So that's promising.
It was promising, and certainly hearing from the staff who was at the meeting last week in Thibodaux, I was very, very relieved to hear that there was a lot of agreement there. Now, again, those groups had to go back to their larger organizations to discuss this situation, and so there may be some differences come May when we talk about this in a little bit more official capacity, but certainly there was some promise there.
Thank you.
Maybe I missed the memo in the secretary, but the last thing I heard, and I know Commissioner McPherson and I participated in some of those Zoom meetings, and I was very happy to hear that there was potential for compromise and both sides were negotiating in good faith. But then I heard that the potential compromise was shot down by the group that wants the restrictions. Is that?
Well, we only heard concern back from one of the groups that was involved in that, one of the recreational groups that was involved in that meeting. So I don't know that means that the larger recreational community, including the charter industry, does not like this compromise. We just heard that there was concern from one of the groups that was there.
Okay, I know, because I know staff has put a lot of time and effort into this, as well as some of the stakeholders. And I don't want us to waste a lot of time.
Right.
If despite concessions, some folks are still gonna be intractable, refuse to agree to anything. All right, well, we will move forward. Commissioner McPherson?
Madam Chair, I think this is going to be another one of those classic examples that if neither side really likes the final result, then it's probably a good compromise. Again, this is a user conflict, and probably both sides would wish the other one would go away and let them do their business. But I do think that it is extremely proper for the commission and the department to exercise our roles in coming up with reasonable regulations, even though it's not to preserve the resource from all the biological data we've got and all it. It's no threat there. It's, again, a user conflict, but since this was added to the agenda, I don't want to belabor the discussion today. Just request an NOI, and then the NOI process itself allows plenty of opportunity for public debate and public input into the issue. So at this time, unless there's someone else has anything, I would move the motion to request an NOI be developed for our May meeting.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Gotta take these first.
Yes, I would accept public comment now that you have a motion.
All right, and Commissioner Blanchard, do you have a comment?
Although, the only thing I wanted to say was just looking at what the department's done and laid it out, it looks like it's user-friendly to the commercial side and the recreational side. And I'm just thinking that both parties should be well pleased with this right here, because it seems like, last year when it was brought to our attention, the bulk of the complaints was coming from the Elmer's Island to the Grand Isle, pass right there. And if we could just get that, and in the recreation, if they don't have to see these Manhattan boats a quarter of a mile off the beach where they fishing, they should be happy with that too. That way we can compromise on both parties. So I'll move forward with the NOI too for next month's meeting also.
And just for clarification, I appreciate you saying all that. What the department did was try to graphically show what seemed to be the proposal and the agreement. We didn't come with this proposal. We were just simply there for information and trying to help show what the agreement was. We actually came to this meeting with a little bit different sets of maps based on the input from the previous meeting. And then this was the result that came out. So that's been our role, is just to be there and support. And it's really been the efforts and the collaboration between the two sides of this issue that has resulted in this, really not necessarily us pushing it. So I really give kudos to both sides on trying to come up with some kind of reasonable compromise.
If we understand there's an issue between the users, but from our point of view as a department, is there any, if not for the issue being brought before us, is there any reason based on science or based on the resources for us even to be involved in taking any action on this?
From a biological standpoint, if we had a concern from a biological standpoint for menhaden as well as for the redfish and speckled trout based on scientific studies, we would have come to you with that. But based on the science that's there right now, based on the fact that menhaden's not overfished, based on the fact that MSC certification has been achieved by the industry, which looks at ecosystem level impacts and makes sure that you don't have ecosystem level impacts or you wouldn't get that certification, based on all the bycatch studies that we've looked at, based on the comparison of that bycatch in terms of volumetric bycatch to what is taken overall of those recreational species in a year, we don't have that biological concern. That's correct.
All right, thank you. Mr. Richard Fisher wishes to address the commission. Mr. Fisher, when you come up, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Richard Fisher, representing the Louisiana Charter Boat Association, Meadowdale Street and Metairie. I have to make the comment that it is a misrepresentation to state that a tentative agreement, using the word agreement in any way, even with the word tentative attached to it, would be a correct representation of this meeting in Thibodaux last week. An offer was made and the other side said, we'll think about it. And after a few days, the answer was returned to them that we declined. So to represent it as anything close to an agreement, I think is not the proper way to appreciate the way that last Tuesday went. I also want to comment that if we were going to talk about this in an official agenda item capacity today, I wish it would have been announced earlier this week or on Friday when the original agenda came out. We could have had many, many, many more public comments here that I think would have added a lot of light to the issue. And I think that would have been a more appropriate way to go about it. That's just my 2 cents. And that's really about all I have to say. And I thank you all for letting me speak, and I'll take any questions y'all have.
Chair, Commissioner McPherson.
I don't have a question for you. I have a comment. We're being very careful, and it's only at the request of our council that we put it as an agenda item. This was a simple request. That's all we put on the agenda, was a request for an NOI. I think you're familiar with the NOI process. It provides plenty of opportunity for public comment. We're not adopting anything. We're just asking for an NOI that would be based. Anybody can comment in the meantime, not officially, but you can call Mr. Banks. He's always available, and any of his staff. So please don't chide us for doing what we think is responsible. And that's asking that we exercise our constitutional authority to regulate industries in the fisheries segment. And I'm sure that the room will be full, just like it was back in November with people when we had the issue before us. When Mr. Corville wanted a 1 mile limit that wouldn't have protected Grand Isle, as the mayor had worked out on the thing and all. only white sandy beaches, you know, and all, and wouldn't have made it much sense from a biological standpoint. So everybody's going to get to have their say in also. I hope you understand the way the process works. I was going to request the NOI. Our council said you ought to do it as an agenda item just to be safe on it.
May I ask why you're doing it now, 2 weeks before the
Well,
legislative
because to
session
get,
and not several
to
months
get
ago
an
when this came
NOI
out?
before our next meeting, we've got to request it at this meeting. Actually, I asked them to have one prepared for this thing, said, no, we need to go through all the proper legal processes. And so we're doing that. We're a constitutional authority, just like the legislature is, both created under the Constitution. The legislature can do what they want to. The governor can do what he wants to with his veto power. But we have a constitutional authority, and we're going to exercise that. I don't know how my colleagues are going to vote on it. I don't know how I'll vote on it with the NOI. This is the first time that I've really had that. You heard my questions on it. I don't completely understand it. But I just wanted to comment that don't think we're pulling something or doing anything. How many months process will this be?
I did not accuse you of that, sir.
I heard a little bit different, but what is the process, Patrick? How many months will this take?
I probably have to refer to general counsel, but if you pass an NOI, then it's typically a 90-day period of public comment. Is that right? 45?
45 days of public
Okay.
comment, then you have legislative oversight. It's a 90-day process at the very shortest. Depending on when the economic impact statements and everything get in, it could be 120 days or longer. You have up to a year to finalize a notice of intent.
That was my understanding. So
Yeah.
basically, we're going to be on a dual track. If the legislature, we haven't heard them say anything. I don't know if there's bill pre-file. We're going to get that update in a little bit. But we're going to be on a dual track if they do something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Fisher? Thank you. Mr. Crescent, you said you're against the proposal. You didn't check off, I would like to speak. Would you like to speak?
If I can.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Name and address, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is David Cresson. I'm with the Coastal Conservation Association of Louisiana. 12241 Industrialplex in Baton Rouge, 70809. And similar to Richard, I just want to make it clear that we did send a message to Wildlife and Fisheries staff and the legislators who were engaged in the meeting last week in Thibodeau, letting them know that we appreciated all their hard work, et cetera, but that we could not agree to the 1/4 mile offer that was made. And so that we'd take it from there. So I just wanted to make that clear that there was an offer made. We took it back to our boards respectively. And as a group, we just could not agree to it. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
But I do very much appreciate all the hard work that Patrick and his staff did. Appreciate the industry for coming to the table, commissioners and legislators who worked hard on it. And I think, I think we have a path yet to go down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, did the charter fishing group reject the proposal as well? Richard?
Madam Chairwoman, that is correct. The 1/4 mile is not something the Charter Boat Association was prepared to agree to.
All right, Commissioner McPherson.
What's a little bit strange, we're announcing that we're going to have an NOI. And both of us are y'all are both telling us that y'all don't like the tentative agreement, but neither one of you are proposing a suggestion that we may want to look at to include in the NOI.
If I can respond,
Well-
are you asking me to respond to that?
Commissioner McPherson,
I'm giving you-
Perhaps-
I'm giving.
I know, but rather than debate that here, perhaps they could talk
I'm
to
just pointing
staff
out if
about
you
it.
want to.
I mean, what are your thoughts?
It's your role, Madam Chairman, to conduct the meeting, and I think that you can.
Yeah, I would think that would, if y'all have proposals, I would certainly invite y'all to discuss it with staff. That way, if staff is formulating an NOI for our review, I believe they will take that into account, keeping in mind our goal of protecting the resource and acknowledging the science, and at the same time, our constitutional authority, as Commissioner McPherson pointed out. But certainly, I would suggest that y'all discuss your wish list with staff.
And if I may comment, that has been done and that will continue. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
and that's
McPherson.
all I was suggesting, you know, that's why we wanted to announce that we were coming with an NOI to give everybody an opportunity. You know, I talked to another conservation group, told them the same thing, you know, instead of y'all being hit with an NOI on an agenda, you know, and not having input, this gives you another month. This gives you a more informal avenue to give your comments.
I would just suggest that y'all keep in mind, all or nothing is not a real good position to take. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. All right,
I
next
can't
item.
respond to that. You're saying we're
Excuse me,
doing a-
sir, you no longer have the floor.
Just a simple question.
Yes, sir.
I've been doing some research. I read, you know, that this issue was going on. The data on both sides has been archived on the November meeting. Is it?
Yes,
available?
sir.
Okay,
That's
so
available.
what I want to do is get up to speed between now and the next
Certainly.
meeting. So,
Staff can assist you with getting all that information to you,
Okay.
and I think most of it is online on our site.
Correct. We should have minutes and videos
Okay.
available online, but if they're not up yet, we'll.
And so that would
we'll provide
include the CCA and the charter boat people too. What on their,
To the extent that public comments were made, I don't
Okay.
specifically recall. I know that there was a presentation on the bycatch and some of the scientific data that went into it. Patrick may have a better recollection
Right.
of what all information was.
well, I
presented.
mean, I can look it up myself, Patrick.
Well, Commissioner, we can supply it to you. We can provide you with
Okay.
all the materials we provided to the commission back in November, and any information we have since then. But I don't know what else you would need other than public testimony. And if that's the case, Susan and I can work together to get you the public testimony.
That's all I need.
And perhaps you just let the folks on staff know, they'll be happy to sit down with you and bring you up to speed.
Okay, that's great. I just want to be ready when this comes up.
Sure.
Patrick, send that to me too.
Okay.
All right, next item.
Madam Chairman, I believe you have a motion and a second on the
Oh, that's
table,
true.
but there
We
hasn't
do.
been a formal vote. I will remind you that the way we set agendas, any commissioner can request an agenda item through the secretary. It doesn't have to be formal action. As Commissioner McPherson did state, though, this provides some informal notice instead of it popping up on an agenda, you know, the Friday before the next meeting. So
Yes.
if you'd like to take a formal vote on it, you can. You're not required to for it to be on the next agenda item.
We will,
Okay.
but in the meantime, Commissioner Sinceri?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the department for following our instruction to try to meet and bring the groups together to talk, because I think that's an important thing. And I mean, we're talking basically 5 months now that kind of situation has been going on, and we spent a long time at our meeting talking about it back in November. So thank you all for doing that and following those instructions.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Commissioner Gibbs.
I heard from CCA and the charter boat people, quarter mile's not gonna work. So in a perfect world, I don't want this to be a discussion. I just want a one-word answer. In a perfect world, what distance works for charter boat / CCA? Half mile, a mile? Is there a right answer to that? Sure.
We were very much in favor of Commissioner Corbill's 1 mile
Okay.
offering
I got you. So Patrick, if in fact we come to some agreement, it's a quarter mile, 3/4 of a mile, whatever it is, and somebody gets caught within the space that's not allowed, less than the 3/4 mile or the 1 mile, what happens? Does enforcement, can we put that boat on the dock for 3 months? Is they just get a ticket and they can continue to do it and keep paying and keep fishing? What are the consequences for the actions?
Unfortunately, I'd probably have to turn that over to enforcement. I'm not exactly sure what the class violation would be. But certainly it would be a violation of commission rules. And you guys would, enforcement would be able to cite that vessel. If any further detail on that, I'd probably have to turn over to Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up, Commissioner, but I can get you that information as soon
Okay.
as the meeting's over with. I can send you the penalties on that.
Thank you, because
Yeah.
that's something I feel that would need to be enhanceable, meaning if it's $100 fine and you go pay it once, I'm gonna do it every day because I'm making way more. So you just keep stopping me, you keep writing me, and I'm gonna keep paying $100 and I don't really care what the law says. So if we make it enhanceable offense where the fines and the penalties get higher and higher each time, and more importantly, we can start docking boats, that's when people will start paying attention as to what the law actually says and the penalties for the people who violate.
And I
Go ahead.
appreciate that. And not necessarily to that point, but I just want, for the record, you heard Mr. Fisher say that that was not what was agreed to. And they expressed concern about the proposal. And that made it seem like what I presented to you guys was not factual. And I want to apologize for that. I am not aware. I was not at that meeting. My staff gave me a full report. I talked to them at length while they drove back from that meeting. They seemed to think that there was a tentative agreement at that meeting. But they did report correctly that those groups needed to go back to their larger groups. As of this morning, I have not heard from my staff that we have been contacted by anybody but CCA, like Mr. Cresson mentioned, about an all-out no on that agreement. So I apologize that my testimony seemed a little bit different from theirs. I was reporting what had been reported to me and as the facts that I knew them at that time. So it's news to me that Mr. Fisher had sent something official to us saying that they don't agree, but I will check with my staff and clear that up. So I apologize if my staff and I were not on the same page.
All
That's
right.
quite all right. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Secretary of Bank.
Mr. Chairman.
Who was the second on that motion, please? All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 8, receive a report on R3, action progress regarding licenses.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
Renee
morning.
Leverton, and the Public Information Director for the agency. So Rob Shadowin was supposed to be up here with me, so he had a meeting in North Louisiana. He apologizes that he couldn't make it. So I'm going to give the presentation on his behalf. So R3 stands for Recruitment, Retention, Reactivation. R3 activities seek to create new participants or increase participation rates of current or lapsed hunters, anglers, and shooters. In short, R3 attempts to create new hunters, anglers, and shooters and keep the ones that we have. Understanding how and why decisions are made to start hunting and fishing, to continue hunting and fishing, allows us to create more effective strategies to accomplish our goals. Because I'm kind of a visual learner, I thought that this graphic would help explain a little bit about R3 strategies and what stage of the customer journey they're implemented. You'll see here recruitment occurs early on. So you become aware of hunting, fishing, you gain an interest, and then you try it out. You actually put a fishing pole in somebody's hand, a shotgun in somebody's hand, actually go hunting. Then those individuals decide to buy a license. They become a hunter, usually with support. Family and friends take them hunting. And then they progress a little further on that journey. They're hunting by themselves, hopefully bringing other family members and friends hunting and fishing. And then maybe they lapse for a year, 5 years, 10 years, and then we attempt to try to reactivate them. So this chart is just meant to demonstrate that R3 is a process where different strategies occur to reach people at different stages of their hunting and fishing journey. In 1991, 40 million people hunted and fished. After 30 years, 39.6 million people were hunting and fishing. That sounds like a minimal decrease, but the population rose by 30% during that time period. The North American model of wildlife conservation is a user pay all benefit funding system supplied by fees from hunting and fishing licenses, excise taxes on equipment used to boat, hunt, fish, shoot. The financial virility and therefore the effectiveness of the model will deteriorate should participation in hunting and fishing begin to wane. So looking here a little bit more closer to home, here in Louisiana, you'll notice that our basic fishing and basic hunting license trends are declining, especially since 2016, with the exception of our fishing license sales last year. We're kind of calling that the COVID spike. Hunters and anglers not only help fund conservation in Louisiana, but you'll see that our total economic impact from those activities across the state are pretty large. 1.29 billion for hunting, angling, 1.6 billion, 22,000 jobs. It's the source of many arguments at the start of every hunting season between me and my wife. When that first credit card bill comes in, she would assure you that I'm like half of that 1.29 billion, but okay, so threats to hunting and fishing. Why is this decline occurring? Competing outdoor and indoor activities, think organized sports are becoming more and more developed, video games, social support structures changing between the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Things are just different now. There's a shifting rural to urban population. The hunting and fishing public is aging. Time constraints, work demands, all of these things are just threats and contribute to the decline of hunting and fishing. So seeing this trend, groups came together, CAS, RBFF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, came together with NGOs, outdoor related NGOs, outdoor industry groups, came together and developed what they call a national plan. It took several years to develop. They adopted it in June of 2016. And that plan kind of gave some direction to state agencies across the country. Some of those key elements were to dedicate staff at state agencies, incorporate private sector tools to communicate with and track customers, to work together with industry members, think all of the outdoor stores, those big groups, outdoor NGOs. If we're losing customers, they're losing customers and they're losing members. So let's kind of pull resources together. And finally, develop a plan specific to your agency was one of the big recommendations, and they gave guidance on that. So that's what we did. You'll see one of those in your packet. Internally, an R3 committee was developed. We created a strategic plan. We were able to learn from a lot of the successes and failures across the country from other state agencies. And that's what we did. So you'll see that in your packet. At a high level, it's pretty detailed. It's almost 50 pages, but kind of roughly what's in there. And it's still a little bit of a draft. Some of the charts are being QA/QC'd, but you'll see detailed license trends, ideas that include the whole gamut from simplifying license purchases to targeted email campaigns, developing how-to content and videos for our new hunters and anglers, mentor programs, and where we can't have mentor programs because volunteers and staff are declining, that online how-to content we need to figure out how to make that take its place. Surveys, engaging the industry members, recruiting and training volunteers. There's just a lot of content in there that helps try and focus some of our R3 efforts. This is a lot. I know that you can't read it, but Rob wanted me to point this page of your plan out. And it just kind of lists a lot of the activities that have R3 implications here at the agency. And they're plotted on that recruitment, retention, reactivation process chart. You'll notice that we're very recruitment heavy. Our plan attempts to kind of solve that and fill in some of that white space over on the retention and reactivation side. Being heavy in recruitment is not a bad thing. As you know, it takes a lot of work to actually put a fishing pole in somebody's hand, a shotgun in somebody's hand. Trial means getting them out there in the woods and getting them to experience it, and that takes a lot of work. So whenever I kind of give some R3 presentations, everybody says, well, what are other states doing? What do the successes look like? So I've got just a few quick slides here to talk about some case studies. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, I just was on a webinar maybe 3 weeks ago, and they presented these. So these are pretty fresh. So geofencing, they geofenced one of their farmers markets. Geofencing is when you kind of digitally or virtually draw a line around a very specific area, and people that with their phone walk into that area are served ads for the next let's say 30 days. So people that went to this farmer's market that had met specific audience criteria, they were outdoor oriented, they received ads to buy a Tennessee hunting or fishing license for the next 30 days. $8,700 spend generated $205,000 in revenue. They did another geofencing ad at their wilderness festival, $2,000, and they generated $51,000 in revenue. Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, they just bought Google search, $10,000, generated $321,000 in revenue. Digital display ads, that's when I go looking for life preservers for my kids, and for the next 2 months, I'm seeing life preserver ads on every website I go to. Those are digital display ads that they spent $10,000 on for people that searched or for any kind of fishing, hunting related activity. They would see ads for their agency to buy. Anyway, so that generated $115,000 in revenue. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission did a trout season campaign, and they bought social media ads. 7,300 generated $241,000, and another digital display buy they did $1,500, generated $21,000 in revenue. So those are just some quick case studies. I'll tell you that I was at a conference a couple of years ago when a guy, Jeff Rawlinson, he was giving a presentation on R3, and he kind of concluded with the thought that, forget about license sales. Not you, Brian, don't forget about license sales, but forget about conservation efforts. Just think about the idea of hunting and fishing and that tradition waning and future generations not having that opportunity. And I think that that's kind of what keeps this R3 committee dedicated to this and working on it, is just knowing that this is just a passion of ours, and it's important. And that's it. That was pretty high level R3. Happy to hear.
Yes. Commissioner McPherson. Oh, I was going to ask, it seems as though to me that the younger generation is not as interested in hunting and fishing as we were growing up. And I don't know I know the archery, I think the archery in schools program should be heavily supported, because I think that's a segue into hunting. But I don't know what we could do with the schools, because you'll have folks who are just anti-hunting. But in like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, are there ways we could work with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to do a badge or something to try to find a targeted way to introduce younger people to the sports?
I agree. I think there's tons of opportunities. There's just a whole gamut and wide range of things. I think a lot of it just revolves around getting in front of those groups, having the time and the staff to be able to do that. I think you're right, though. Shooting sports is always part of R3, just because it's that gateway. It's once they get hooked on archery and shooting, the next logical step for them seems to be hunting. So the more participation we encourage there, the better.
Yeah, I think reaching the youngsters is critical, but
I agree.
it's not perhaps a good time to go around talking about how great shooting is. So it makes your job difficult. I am amazed at the ROI on those geofences. So
Yes.
that is something that certainly has to be looked at, to choose the right locations and put a little money on it. Thank you. Commissioner McPherson.
That was a perfect lead in to my question. Basically that what you're showing us is advertising works. And it works with the hunting and fishing industry just like it does with any other. At some point, are we going to see a proposal, Mr. Secretary, that we need to make an investment to try to get these types of returns on investment?
Well, I can tell you right now, we've got 2 grants. Our focus in terms of funding, I think you're right. The answer is money was the question. We need to invest some money. So we've been applying for every grant possible, and we're having some of those hit now. And I think that's been great. In terms of future proposals, I'm not sure, but anytime there's a grant that is R3 that's advertising related, we're applying for it. But keep in mind, it's usually national grants that 50 states are applying for. So they're pretty competitive.
Well, are you looking at using the foundation to try to get some money for this?
The foundation is involved in all of these grants. So yes, they've been great partners for us. But eventually, the money's got to come from somewhere, even to the foundation.
Yeah.
So they have been great partners for us.
Right. But it's a great presentation, and I think we need to accomplish it however we do it. One of the things that I had a conversation with our revenuer over there, and he's asleep, so I'll look over this way. But one of the things that was disappointing, one of the things that Colonel Abear appreciates about me is I watch Backwoods Law. It used to be the northern states, now they're in Texas. That's not near as interesting as where they got snow. But I was reading it in one state, Brian, you may remind me what I've mentioned to you, but it's a simple thing of having automatic renewals on our license. And Brian explained to me that we don't have the simple technology because of having to go through the state's IT, I guess, to be able to accomplish that. But if you're talking about retention, what's simpler, what people are used to with their newspaper subscription and with everything else, an automatic renewal to where they don't have to do it. Because how many fishing license holders do you lose every year? Because they don't mind paying the nominal sum. They understand what it's going for. And part of, I know I tell people all the time, well, a lot of what I pay for is opportunity. Not that I'm ever going to take the opportunity, but I want it to be there if I choose to use it. So what does it take to get that, from a retention standpoint of your your basic hunting license automatic renews, your fishing license, your crab gear, whatever it is.
Commissioner, we're close to that, okay? That we're looking at that in particular and some other instruments that will certainly benefit us financially. So we're close to that phase. I'm hoping to have that into effect within the next 12 months. So that'll be a big plus for us. I've been working on this since I got here. Being strapped for cash is a hard thing. Any business that's strapped for cash is always going to be kind of playing catch up, and that's where we're at right now. But I believe in the next 12 months, we'll be able to offer that to our constituents in Louisiana, and that's going to be a big plus.
I guess the reason I mentioned it here, we're talking about something that we recognize takes an investment. You got to spend money to make money, it's a chicken and egg to some degree. But on this IT deal, that's just us being burdened with the state's information technology system and having to wait on somebody else that we're not at the top of the food chain for their priority or something. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Commissioner Giddens.
Quick statement and a question. I agree with you, Joe. The automatic renewal is going to be a tremendous help on the licensing to keep the retention. I believe the communication I've had is they're working on putting an automatic renewal already be on there, so it automatically renews. You have the ability to opt out of the automatic renew as opposed to opting in for it. So you will automatically be renewed as opposed to, but still have the option to opt out of it. As far as, and I'm just learning this because my kids are getting to the high school age, that the single largest fundraiser in the private school world is the bass tournaments. Unbelievable the resources and the funds raised at the private school level for these things. I know my DA has one, his kids went to Catholic in Baton Rouge. They have a huge fishing rodeo in Grand Isle. My kids just started high school in Lafayette. The first call I got was somebody looked up on the damn website and found me as a commission, wants to partner and get help for their bass tournament, which is May 20 something. So is there any collaborative deal between anybody that wants to kind of, I don't want to use the word partner, but work with WLF to where a representative is out there helping weigh the fit? We're doing something to promote the fisheries in this thing, because I think when they get involved, more people see it, more people are going to want to be a part of it.
I think I'll have to defer to Patrick, and he's got an incredible outreach and education team. I don't know what their capabilities and staff and that is.
And I don't need to know the extent of it. It's just that something we could work on outside of this meeting right here.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it. Good, thank you very much.
Commissioner Sinceri.
I won't be long. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just, as far as education goes, I think we need to try to start young and keep it all the way through college. And I don't know if I would hope y'all would keep in mind some type of programs that would be available to students that would be both in class and then offer it outside of class at possibly a wildlife management area or something like that, because that's a fun type of thing. And you have to start changing people's thought process on it. Because when I was a kid, which is a very long time ago, it was, parents and uncles and aunts and all that were doing this because it was part of the culture. And we're moving away from all of this with electronics and everything, television and all of that we have nowadays. And if we could bring it into the classroom and then expose them to the outdoors in some of these things that we do at a younger age, and continuing it through college and offer, classes that I think you would get a lot of takers all the way through that when you start getting into classes in college. If they were able to do something that's fun and outside of the classroom, learning about hunting and fishing. And anyway, I hope y'all would look at that too when y'all start. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinceri. Anything further on that issue? All right, thank you. We're going to move to one that is a sore spot. Let's hope I get some good information. Item number 9, receive update on department telecommunication issues.
Yes, ma'am. Well, unfortunately, you probably won't hear really good information. I will acknowledge that we do have a problem, that we know we have a problem. Jack's coming to my attention. And really the problem right now is staffing. We're down, we used to have 16 people in that position. Now we have 11. We used to have a lady at the front desk. That person retired and we have never replaced it. A hunter ed person is gone. She passed away through COVID. I'm sorry to report. We've taken on those boating duties in that as well. And, last year during the COVID spike, we sold 10,000 more boats than we did the year before, 3,000 more motors than we did the year before. We got backlogged 60 days. And so it's the same. Right now, there's 11 people. There's 12 positions, but we only have 11. One of them's out for an extended period of time, doing all that. And so we try to balance the best we can. I want to give Michelle Rayburn and Andrew Gray, say we have so many people on phones, so many dealing with customers here, and then trying to work our way through mail. We found that the mail backlog was causing a lot of phone calls because they were checking on their boat registration when it's 60 days. And whenever it says in the boat registration, if you're over 30 days, you're a violation. So we changed the voicemail to the phone system to say, look, we're aware of the backlog. So we've been trying to balance it as best we can. And obviously it's not good enough, and I apologize for that. I will say that we have caught up on mail. We're 2 weeks back. Since then, our phones have dropped back. We've been able to put more additional resources on phones. And the only good other things I can say is we've been working, this is not just since you've created an agenda item, but we have been working with OTS to do a new phone system. One of the problems I have with our phone system is once you select something, it's just dead silent. So people don't know if they're on or off. We were trying to maintain a 20-minute call wait, which, yeah, I understand now it's not acceptable. So we're trying to lower that. But the new system will allow people to say, this is the call wait. The wait time is expected to be this. So it sets customer expectations. It has background music, or we'll be able to put messages on there to where we could advertise something like we have a fishing rodeo going on this weekend, or we have Becoming an Outdoor Woman, you can apply for it. So we can promote the department a little bit through that wait time that's going on. Unfortunately, the thing I said was bad news is, right now we have a financial situation with the department. We're trying to raise revenue. we're not hiring people. We're not, you know, Jack's not in here, but we're 152 warm bodies down from when he started. And so we don't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to lay them off if we don't have some sort of firm financial situation. Cole's going to go into a little bit of this with his legislation, and y'all saw in December when I gave it. So we are aware of the problem, and I apologize for it because I want to deliver exceptional customer service, and right now we're not. But I want to assure you that the people who are in charge of it are aware of it. And so if we can get a new phone system that helps a better customer experience, it may not help the wait time, but it'll be a better customer experience. And as we are caught up, we're able to put more resources on the phone, and it has been better since we have caught up on our mail. So with that, yes, ma'am.
I'm not saying go out and spend a whole lot of money on a new phone system, but understand that when you call the department and the phone rings and rings and rings and no one ever answers, it's frustrating.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you know, if a computer voice answered and said, press 1 for licensing, and I pressed 1, and then I said, unfortunately, all agents are busy and your estimated wait time is 42 minutes, I would put it on speakerphone and go about my business until my 42 minutes elapsed. But to call and nobody answers is not appropriate for this department.
It's not, and it's not acceptable, and I agree with you.
All
And
right.
that's why we're.
But I'm not talking about going to spend a whole lot of money on a
No,
new
no,
phone
ma'am.
system.
The phone system that we have was implemented in 2009, and it's actually in October, it's going to be obsolete. So this new system that OTS is doing that has the ability to do the wait time and stuff we're not anticipating it to cost any additional money than we're spending now. This is
Okay.
a state-run system. Now, there is the possibility of, you know, you can leave a message or leave your phone number and we'll call you back. We're getting a quote on that. That would be cost additional dollars. So we want to see what that costs.
Why do that? You create more work. If somebody really wants to talk to you, when it tells them the wait time, they're gonna hang on.
Yes.
Because then if you don't call them back quick enough, people are gonna get frustrated. I wouldn't, just my opinion, wouldn't go that route. Yes, sir, Commissioner McPherson.
I don't want to be too critical, but when you call the 2800 number, that's the main number, isn't it? There's 2 published numbers. 2800, I believe, is one of them.
Yes, sir.
I think what you get is a male voice comes on.
Yes, sir.
And it gives you the option of selecting several things. And I can't remember, but I think that when you select one of them, you don't get an answer, you just get a ring. Or no, I think you do, you get it put on hold again.
Yes, sir. So I'm responsible for 1, which is the licensing and boat registration. And then if you hit 0, it goes to, that's the general questions. So that's what's handled down here on the first floor. If you hit a 2, 3, or 4, that goes to enforcement, wildlife, or fisheries. It rings to different numbers on the 2nd floor, 4th floor, and the back.
Yeah, I remember now. I'm not making this up. I wanted to talk to you, so I hit 0. I ain't never gonna talk to Brian McClinton hitting 0. That's never gonna happen.
Whatever I was calling, it just rang.
But how many people are in this building on a given day?
I'm not sure.
A bunch, huh? 4 floors of people, huh?
Yes, sir.
Should pick, well, maybe now's a good time to pick on Jack, he's not in the room. But it really looks like somewhere y'all could get together and rotate call schedules or something where somebody would pick up the phone around here, because if you want to destroy a business, don't answer the phone. So we get these presentations of what it takes to enhance our business by being consumer friendly and trying to attract people and all. Well, not answering the phone is the best way to negate all that, you know. It's the old deal, you know, one off shit wipes out 20 attaboys.
Yes, sir.
And the thing, so I would really, even though we understand and we're gonna help we're all gonna do our part to try to get the fees passed and stuff, but y'all ought to really look and see if there's not somebody could answer the phones around here on a more timely basis.
Yes, sir. And I will share this. I mean, I don't want to be an agency that when you go to it, it takes 5 hours to get something processed, or exactly what you expressed. There's certain state agencies that I've called and never been able to ever talk to somebody. I don't want to be that. And right now we are that. So we're trying to make it better. And I know that everything in state government takes a long time to make better. So I apologize for that. But I do want to say that the people who do responsible for that are working very hard. I mean, it's not like they're just, it is, they are responsible for a lot of phones, mail, everything
Yes,
else.
are boat sales and all down now? Because I know at home, the boat dealers don't have any inventory to sell.
Well, and maybe, I don't know about right now, but I know last year,
I don't want to talk about last now.
Yep.
What y'all are catching up on your backlog. And
We've
I'm
caught
wondering
up.
if that's because that big, where they bought every RV, every camper, every four-wheeler, every tractor, every boat, motor and trailer that was out there when they were getting their COVID checks and had plenty of time. I'm asking, are you catching up on your backlog because now you're back to a more normal
renewal
application process?
Yes, sir. And a lot of what we do is the renewals. So, every 3 years, those that were bought 3 years ago are coming through. So last year was the influx of new purchases, but we're still going to have the same, we have about 300,000 boats in the state. So any given year, 100,000 of them are coming
But
through.
that's your normal workload.
Yes, sir. It's work. Yeah. And so, I guess we're back down because 14 days is what we really try to strive to on mail and commercial and boat renewal. So we're right where we should be. So it could be a reason that we're not having this huge influx of additional mail at the time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, public comments on the NOI for rule changes in wild quadrupeds, wild bird rules and regs, general wildlife management, area hunting rules and regs, general and WMA turkey hunting regs, resident game hunting, season date adjustments, 2021, 2022, 22-23, and migratory bird season adjustments for 21-22. Mr. Tuma.
Good morning, Ms. Chair. Excited to be here in front of y'all today. My presentation is going to be very brief. I'm going over the summary of public comment for the conditionally approved hunting season notice of intent, and then the comment received for the potpourri amendment that y'all passed last week. The public comment received, the public comment period closed for the regular notice of the hunting season notice of intent. So I did not receive any new public comment. I will say that 2 days ago, I believe you got an email from the comments inbox. However, that particular gentleman has already emailed you, probably recognize the name several times, and he's making the same request of no either 6 days on RKY. So I didn't add it to the public comments as that comment has already been tallied in your summary. So in your packet, you received all this information, and this information is exactly the same information that you received from me last month. So these numbers have not changed. So we'll skip through that pretty quick and go straight to the potpourri amendment. If you remember the potpourri amendment, the Responsible Hunting Scent Association is taking over the deer protection program from the Archery Trade Association. Due to that, we made this change in Title 76 as a potpourri amendment. We updated that language. Subsequently, you conditionally approved it. And I've received zero public comment on that change, as it's really not that big of a change. It's just an entity change. But that public comment went from last commission meeting till today. As a reminder, we will have a public hearing on the proposed substantive changes. This is the potpourri amendment. We will have this public hearing on April 21st in this room at 10 a.m. for those who want to come express their pleasure or displeasure, support or non-support with this potpourri amendment. I will be here and Ms. Susan will be here that morning to meet with the public should anyone show up. With that, I will take any questions.
Questions? No.
Lovely.
Mr. Acting Chair, I'll go ahead and do my monthly run through how this procedure works. This is April. There are no action items available for the commission at this time. You just received public comment from Tommy. As he mentioned, there will be a public hearing regarding the one amendment that y'all made last month. And we did receive one public comment via the email portal regarding deer hunting on Richard K. Yancey. That has been provided to you in your packets. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Mr. Tuma.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 11, tracking blue-winged teal using GPS GSM transmitters. Mr. Brett Leach with the University of Missouri.
All right, thank you. So as you mentioned, my name is Brett Leach. I'm with the University of Missouri. I'm working under Dr. Lisa Webb. She's a great spatial ecologist. And this project, it's primarily funded through LWF and Ducks Unlimited. So I just figured I'd give a brief overview of where we're sitting with the project and some of the preliminary things that we're seeing. All right, so just a little bit of background. It's like I just started grad school this last fall, so I was doing a lot of literature review on blue-winged teal. And like I knew that we really didn't know all that much about them, but when I really started diving into the literature review, I was surprised like how much we really didn't know about them and all the basic ecological information that we're lacking. But blue-winged teal, they're one of the first species of waterfowl to migrate south in the fall and one of the latest to arrive back on the prairies in the spring. And this timing of migration, it's been difficult to quantify just because we can't rely on banding data. Like we got the early teal season that's in September, and you got your regular season down here that's starting in November. So you're missing that time period when a lot of these birds are arriving. And then we may be missing them as they end up going down to Mexico or Central and South America. They also are a species of waterfowl that once they're south of the US border, they're more widespread than any other species of waterfowl of North America. And once they're down there, like we really don't know what the harvest rate is of those birds. Like we know there's a substantial harvested or a bunch of birds that are being harvested down there, but like I said before, we can't rely on that banding data just because there's those language and education barriers for each of those different countries. We also really don't have much for our habitat selection studies currently. And especially like once you get down south of the border, we're working with Ducks Unlimited Mexico right now and getting geospatial layers. That way they can better manage blue-winged teal down there and other waterfowl species as well. And just because like the cross-seasonal effects, like the work that they do down there, it's going to benefit the birds that come through Louisiana as well. Just a little overview on the early September blue-winged teal season. The season came about because of the droughts in the 1950s and 60s, and when other waterfowl species were not able to, well, they became more restricted, and teal are thought to be underutilized. So they ended up starting a season in 1965, and it's during this early teal season where 47% of U.S. harvest occurs. So previously, with transmitters, we've been kind of limited on the data that we could get from them. A lot of you remember like the VHF telemetry studies where people are out with antennas and trying to track down these birds. And it's just really labor intensive and you're lucky to get a location every day. The stuff that we're using now, the transmitters are continuously becoming smaller and more precise. Like these units that we're using are 10-gram units, and it's like a plus or minus 15-meter accuracy. We're also have ours set to record 24 locations per day. So like once per hour, it's getting another location, and with that location, it's recording the date, time, altitude, speed, temperature, and then we're also getting accelerometer data. And this accelerometer data, if you look at the graph in the bottom right, it's basically a way that we can see like the behavior of the bird. So you can see about like May 25th, like on the middle there, the blue lines start to really fluctuate a lot more, and that's just indicating that the bird's nesting. And you can see that she's taking her daily foraging flights. So this project actually began back in 2019, and I was working with LWF at the time, working under Paul on his Whitefront project. So I've been here for the entirety of the project, and in total, we've deployed 90 transmitters so far. 57 of those have been in Louisiana, 24 in South Dakota, and 9 in Saskatchewan. We were originally supposed to do our fall deployments in Saskatchewan, but because of the pandemic and the border closure, we weren't able to get there, so we relocated to South Dakota. So far, we've seen 21 mortalities, 6 of those due to hunting, 6 during migration, and for the migration mortalities as both 3 in the spring and 3 in the fall. And then on the nesting grounds, we've had 5 mortalities so far and 4 shortly after marking. Unfortunately, when you put transmitters, they have to acclimate to the unit, and it takes about 4 days when they're most susceptible to predation. So specifically, we're looking to identify the critical spring breeding, stopover, and wintering areas. Also looking to quantify spring and fall migration phenology. So we're looking at the initiation dates, the termination dates, like when they're arriving like on the wintering grounds and back in the breeding areas. The total duration of migration, so like the number of days it's taken them and the total distance traveled. And then we're also looking at all these stopover sites that they're using during migration. We're also looking to quantify habitat selection during the non-breeding period. So we'll be looking at habitat all the way from Prairie, Canada, all the way down into Mexico and South America. And then we're also looking to quantify survival and nest success and what some of these like cross-seasonal effects mean for those birds. So this map here is of fall migration of the female blue-winged teal that we have marked. You'll see like there's a cluster up in Saskatchewan, and that's just because that's one of our marking locations, and there's also that cluster in northeast South Dakota. And then like as these birds like start settling in the wintering grounds, like a lot of those times they get out into the marsh, and because these transmitters are using GPS, GSM, so it's basically using cell towers to transmit all the data. Your cell coverage really isn't all that great. So these birds may go offline for a few weeks at a time, up to, I think the longest we've had a bird go offline is 4 months now. But fortunately, these transmitters, they're capable of storing enough locations. Like a bird could, in theory, go like an entire year without checking in, and we'd still be able to get that data. Then here's one of spring migration. So you'll see our marking site down in Louisiana as these birds end up making their way north. And if you pay attention to the dates, you'll see that there's going to be a few times where there's a certain date and these birds all take off at once, and which is likely due to a front that came through. You'll notice as these birds start making their way north, a lot of them end up settling into North and South Dakota, which really wasn't surprising this last spring, given how wet they were. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing this spring, just because the Dakotas sound like they're pretty dry, and Canada is very dry. And again, a lot of these locations, like once they're up in the Dakotas, cell coverage really isn't all that great. So some of these birds may go offline for a little while. And I don't know if any of you guys noticed in the previous movement map, but some of the birds, you may have noticed that they went like basically straight to the prairies while others took their time. And that's one of the things that we're going to end up looking at with this project. So the map on the right, you'll end up seeing, so this is a fall migration. So we marked the bird up in South Dakota, and it went down through Missouri, Arkansas, cut across Louisiana to Texas. And the graph on the left, it may be a little bit confusing, it may look a little inverted, but it's basically just looking at the total distance that the bird ended up traveling. So that black line at the very bottom just indicates the trapping location. So it's at basically 0 meters from, or 0 kilometers from where the bird was actually trapped. And it's at this point right here. So it's October 14th when the bird initiated migration. completed migration October 16th for a total duration of 2 days. So she ended up traveling 1,345 miles over that time period. And this red arrow right here indicates one of the stopover sites that she used. She ended up just stopping for 12 hours and before taking off again.
Wait, excuse me. Clarify that for me. So in 2 days, she went 1,345 miles
Yep, that is correct.
and she only rested for 12 hours.
Yep,
And she rested one time.
yep,
Other than that, she was flying.
yep.
Wow. All right.
That's
So wait. So we're talking 48 hours minus 12?
Yep. Spent quite a bit of time flying.
Huh?
So she spent quite a bit of time flying there.
So that's, I mean, I'm gonna do her miles per hour. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, yep. So, yeah, this is another one of the birds on the right. So you can kind of see like what how their migration strategy ended up differing. So the bird on the right ended up having a lot more long drawn out migration. So she initiated migration August 31st, completed migration October 30th for a total duration of 60 days, total distance of 1,850 miles. And you can see that this bird ended up using a lot more stopover sites. So each of these black lines here is giving me another stopover site. So she used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stopover sites on her way south. And then this is like the type of information that we're gonna end up using so we can look at some of these cross-seasonal effects and what that means for survival and for nest success.
What is a typical with those? Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
What is a typical of migration time north?
You said migration going north?
Yeah.
I mean, most of our birds are leaving about mid-April and arriving by mid-May. So it's typically about a 30-day period that the birds have been using. So with migration, most of our birds, they all initiate migration at dusk and end up migrating through the night. And it seems like they just see a wetland come dawn and they end up stopping there and end up using it as a stopover site. These stopover sites are a critical period for these birds so they can rest and refuel, so they can complete migration. And in the springtime, it allows them to arrive to the breeding grounds in better body condition. Unfortunately, even though it's a short window, it's a risky time period for these birds just because of predation and hunting mortalities. So in the image on the left, that's actually a bird on spring migration that got predated in Arkansas. And looking at the altitude data that we had, we figured it was up in a tree and we got somebody with boots on the ground to go check it out. And it was actually up in an eagle's nest. And then the image on the right, that bird had just arrived in Texas before being shot during the early teal season. I think she was there for like 3 or 4 hours before she ended up getting shot. So another thing that we're seeing is some site fidelity for these birds. So this is actually here in Louisiana. The bird ended up using the same stopover site. And you can see it's the same farm that she's returning to and sometimes actually returning back to the same field. And for a bird like this is going to be a fitness advantage just because it's an area that they're familiar with and they don't have to try to relearn the area. So on the wintering grounds, majority of our birds within the United States have actually wintered in Louisiana. Most of the time, they're typically staying in a 4 to 5 kilometer area. So they're really not moving around quite as much as we thought that they would have been. So you can kind of see it in the image on the left there. She's got like 2 or 3 main spots that she ends up going. and she just kind of bounces between those and then occasionally ends up going off somewhere else before getting back in her routine. We don't really know if that's just like a hunting disturbance or what that is. And this particular bird is actually off of I-55 on the northeast part of that, or where those northeast points are. That's actually a Manchac wildlife management area. So this is a hen that we had originally marked in Saskatchewan that came down and wintered in the Terrebonne marshes here in Louisiana. She actually showed back up, same pool, going to the same places that she had the previous year. And something I thought was interesting is those red points from the winter of 2019, 2020. She stayed basically within that 500-meter cluster during all of hunting season. And after hunting season ended, she ended up hopping south across the intercoastal, or she ended up moving around more and eventually initiated spring migration. And I threw this Venezuela bird in here just so you guys can kind of see how drastic the landscape differences are compared to here in Louisiana. So like down there really wasn't like quite as many wetlands as you would have thought these birds would have been selecting for. And this bird is actually making 13-mile foraging flights every day and just hopping around all over the place compared to like the previous bird I showed you here in Louisiana, where they're staying within a 4 to 5 kilometer area the entire winter. So moving forward, we've got another 35 transmitters to deploy this spring here in Louisiana. And then hopefully we'll be able to get an additional 20 units to deploy up in South Dakota again. And once my field season's done this spring here, I'll really start diving into the data analysis part for this project and hopefully be able to provide another update next year on it. So in particular, I'd like to thank the Ducks Unlimited Institute for Wetland and Waterfowl Research for awarding me their annual fellowship that's available to graduate students. And I'd also like to thank all these other organizations that make this project possible. And we also got a flyer that was put on the back table. I don't know if many of you guys saw that yet for the project that the foundation had put together. So if you guys would like more information, I'd encourage you to take a look at that once we're done. And with that, take any questions.
I have,
Yes, sir.
what's the, how many years you gonna do this?
So this is a 3-year project.
3 years?
Yep, and the transmitter should last 2 to 3 years. So
I was curious because, there's a lot of talk about climate change and that sort of thing. And I've been all the way up to Canada.
Mhm.
And I've seen, during the summertime of the Dakotas and everything. And I was just curious because migration, depends a lot on climate and water and different things. So that would be an interesting sidebar, I would think.
Yeah, I'm really interested to look at basically like how much water is on the landscape and where these birds are deciding to settle in, just because especially blue-winged teal, like they're really associated with the amount of water across the landscape for where they decide to settle in for nesting.
In southern Canada, that's where the glaciers stopped and dug out all the holes and that's what.
Yeah, you got a bunch of potholes in those areas.
So that's, but I was just curious just how long it's gonna go. If you could have maybe a little sidebar on that, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
Commissioner Pierce.
This, in central Louisiana, this is when I see the greatest concentrations of blue-winged teal. Now, are those ducks that wintered in central Louisiana and now they're coming to the road ditches and the little shallow water ponds to feed on crustaceans?
Mhm.
Or are those birds that are migrating? And I think I'm seeing them there for week after week, and actually I'm seeing a bird that just stopped over there for a day.
I mean, a lot of our birds, we have had birds that came back to Louisiana in spring migration, and they actually stick around for quite a while. So like I said before, as they're making their way north, it's usually about 30 days for most of the birds. And a lot of times they'll spend 2 or 3 weeks in an area before
So
taking
that
their
might
next
be
step.
birds that were in Mexico or South or Central America and that's just their stop to refuel on their way back.
Yep.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. If a bird is shot with the transmitter, the hunter's supposed to return the transmitter?
We asked them to, on the transmitter, we got a phone number for them to call. And for the most part, hunters have been really good about returning the unit, and then we can redeploy it and get more data. And then we've got a dummy unit that we'll send to them. That way, if they want to get the bird mounted, they'll be able to throw that on there.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yep, one more.
Just want to say
Commissioner Hall.
thank you for the good work and great to have you here today, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. I
Yes, Brett, we
appreciate it.
really appreciate it and done a wonderful job.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Next item on the agenda, an update on the 2021 snapper season. Assistant Secretary Banks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like has happened several times over the last few meetings, you're getting the third string. Unfortunately, Jason Adrians, who would normally present this, is on vacation, a much deserved, well-deserved vacation. As most of you know, he's been thick in the throes of speckled trout, flounder, and menhaden for the last year or so. So he deserves some time off with his family. And Chris Sheebley, who would be here in his stead, is also on a well-deserved vacation. So you got the third string again. But we've had a lot of questions, rightfully so, about our recreational red snapper season. And so we wanted to give the commission an update on where we stand on that season. And so that's the reason for this presentation this morning. So you probably remember last year about this time, you all passed a notice of intent that changed the hard structure of our season. That season is set in Title 76, and it was originally set with a hard opening date. I want to say sometime in April, and we would always come to you all to delay that to the Friday before Memorial Day. Last year, we asked you guys to change that hard date to the Friday before Memorial Day. So you all passed that last year. So now the hard opening of the private recreational red snapper season is the Friday before Memorial Day. This year is going to be May the 28th, which is the Friday before Memorial Day. So therefore, there's no actual action that is needed to be taken from you all for the season to open. It's actually the opposite. If for some reason you wanted to change that hard opening, that's when you would have to take some sort of affirmative action. So there's no action that we're requesting at this time. But why would you wait to hear more information and possibly make a change? Well, we're going to be going to the Gulf Council meeting later this month, and there's a couple of actions that are going to be taken up at the Gulf Council meeting between April 12th and April 15th. And the Gulf Council may decide to change both the annual catch limits for the Gulf, which could mean a change for Louisiana's allocation of those catch limits. As you recall, we have state management. We are given a portion of that Gulf-wide catch limit every year, and then you all decide how to best use that allocation. And so in the past, we've had a fairly consistent allocation, which is a proportion of the overall Gulf-wide catch limit. And so we've typically run the season structure. You all have run the season structure with a 2 fish limit per day, starting the Friday before Memorial Day. However, if the Gulf Council changes those catch limits, we may feel the need to come back to you all to modify that, hopefully in the higher category rather than the opposite way, but we shall see. And then the other action that may be taken is a calibration of state surveys. We've had this discussion multiple times about calibration and how fish were given to each of the states based on a survey type of data, the federal survey called MRIP. Each of the states counts those fish in their own state surveys and their own state currency, and we have to calibrate between those currencies. Thankfully, Louisiana is pretty close to 1-to-1. So we count the fish in the same currency, so to speak, as the federal system. But there are some some fairly significant changes that could come to Alabama and Mississippi under calibration, and that's why it has to be discussed. So those are the two things that could come at the council meeting later this month that may prompt us to bring you all a recommendation for a change in the season structure. So what we will do is at the next meeting, we'll probably provide you with another short presentation. Hopefully that presentation will just simply say we're going to stay with the status quo or possibly increase the overall catch limit, but it could go another way. So you'll be hearing from us again at the next meeting, just based on the results of that Gulf Council meeting this upcoming, week after next. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioner Sinceri?
Just wonder, you got a crystal ball?
I wish I did, but there are a lot of folks interested in this. I met with some congressional staffers just this week about this very issue of what may happen under calibration, what may happen under the possible change in catch limits. My hope is that the catch limits will go up and we'll see some more fish in Louisiana, but the unknown is the calibration piece. And if calibration goes into effect and it really impacts Alabama and Mississippi, some of those extra fish may be shifted to those two states to try to keep them sort of in the fold of state management, so to speak. So it's really a very difficult thing to put in a crystal ball at this point. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you did receive one comment via the email portal requesting a 4-fish bag limit during the season. That's in your packet.
Yes, I did see that come across my email. I'm sure all the commissioners did. Thank you for pointing it out. So, anything further? Okay, moving on to, thank you, Assistant Secretary Banks. Moving on to agenda item number 13, and notice of intent to amend the domestic aquatic organisms rule. Mr. Bourgeois.
Hi, I'm here today to present a notice of intent to update the domestic aquatic organism rule. You might hear me refer to it as the DAO, and to make additions to the approved species list. Domestic aquatic organisms were established under 56-411, and it allowed the state to have non-native aquaculture. It gave the department the authority over all endangered and threatened fish, freshwater game fish, and all saltwater fish. It also gave us the ability to have a list of approved species that's listed in Chapter 9 of Title 76 of LAC 76. In Chapter 9, we also have a process of how we can add species to the list, and it includes both general and specific regulations for all of the DAO species. So I'm here today to present some updated rules. We went through and we modernized the rules. We added email addresses versus mailing addresses. We updated some of the terminology of position changes in the department. And we further defined the technical review committee of these species. We made it a minimum of 4 members. One must be a LWF biologist, either marine or inland fisheries, depending on the species, 1 enforcement representative, and at least 1 expert outside of LWF. We also wanted to allow us the ability to add species without having a request from the public. A lot of time the public doesn't, they come to us, they want to add a species, but they don't have the knowledge or the ability to give us the information needed to add those species. Another thing we added was exempt personal aquarium owners and retail stores, because the law was kind of a little fuzzy on if they needed to have this license or not in order to sell their fish. We also realized that in that list, we had some species, 5 species of fish that we were not legislatively allowed to have on the list. And these non-game freshwater fish, freshwater drum, buffaloes, golden shiner, flathead minnow, and mosquito fish. So we will remove those fish from the approved list. There was also some legislatively mandated changes that allowed larger size of fish to be stocked in private ponds. And so this NOI will also address that and allow people to have almost instant ponds if they buy these longer fish. We also addressed and updated the tilapia permit regulations. We have two types of tilapia permits. We have a live holder, that's a market that has a display case with fish in it, and you can select your fish and bring it, get it processed and bring it home for food. We also have the commercial farms, which are allowed to grow up either those fish or fingerlings for other states or other activities. We added email, like we said. We increased notification time to give us and enforcement a little bit more notice to address things. We also updated and modernized the species certification. Electrophoresis is an old way of identifying species that really no one does anymore, so we had to adopt the rules to allow more modern techniques. We added more protection by having out-of-state suppliers. They didn't have any liability once they entered the state. And so now the people that are receiving the fish have that liability if something happens to that fish. The industry also asked us to change the expiration date and the start date of the permits to match the calendar year. During December, January, that's a low time for them. It also matches up with our other license for our commercial fishermen. We also updated the species name to reflect what the modern species name are for the fish. We increased our tilapia bond amount. These licenses each had a bond. The live holders had a $10,000 bond and the farms had a $25,000 bond. We wanted to increase both of those up to $50,000. And this pretty much tracks, the 25 to 50 pretty much tracks the inflation rate from the last time this bond was proposed. We're going to do it incrementally, so it's not a giant shock to the industry. They can adjust as they go, and you can see how we're going to raise that over the next 5 years. Now I'm going to present you the species that were added. All these species were requested by the public, and for each one, a panel was formed that reviewed these species to see if they had impacts to the fisheries of the state, fish habitat of the state, or endangered or any threat to human health. The first one I want to talk about is freshwater prawns. The panel recommended, and we agreed, that a $25,000 bond was necessary, inspection of the facility to make sure that it's biosecured and shrimp can't walk off, and have it in a closed indoor culture system with no release of water off-site without treatment. No release of eggs or any fish were allowed without our permission also. The next species is rainbow trout. We didn't propose a bond for this because we know that these fish will not survive in our summer. And so there's no threat that we'd have to go and clean up a bunch of rainbow trout that got out. Same thing qualifies for inspection of the facility. And the other thing we wanted to add here is that we want to make sure the fish are free of didymo, rock snot. Exactly what it sounds like. It covers a slimy substance on rocks. And so we wanted to make sure that was also in part of the rules. The other one we added, this is probably about 20 species right here that were requested. African rifflate cichlids, Brito catfish species, and one species of fancy guppy. This is all aquarium stuff. This is not for human consumption. And so we proposed the same thing. The panel proposed a bond. We've said $25,000, inspection of the facility to make sure it's biosecure, closed indoor culture system, and again, no release of eggs or any fish to the waters of the state without our permission. And so the new DAO list would look like this. We'd have the existing ones. We also added koi and goldfish with no regulations and kakaho minnows with no additional regulations, besides the other fish that I presented those regulations on. Any questions?
That's it?
That's it.
Yes, I have questions. Tell me about freshwater prawns.
Okay. What do you want to know?
How big are they? What are they being used for?
They're used for food. They do get, 6 inches, a little bit bigger. It's basically they put them in and they harvest them inside. Typically, it's 1 crop a year. It's a restaurant type thing. Somebody wants it for a different taste.
Well, so this is the first time we're gonna allow them on the list?
Yes, ma'am.
And what how have we evaluated it to see what happens when they get out?
So we sent that to biologists. There was a couple of federal biologists, professor, and our internal staff. In fact, for that one, we had both marine and inland fisheries biology on it, if I remember right. And we said it was low risk to get out because of the way their habitat is, and also with the regulations that were in place of the closed culture system.
But I guess my question is, because we went through this maybe a year or two ago, with was it a type of sturgeon, I believe they wanted to raise in a closed system, completely contained for caviar. And we said no, as a commission, because apparently they could live if they got out. And the system would have been completely closed, and the sturgeon don't really walk away. So if we're talking a closed system for these prawns, would the prawns be able to survive if they got into fresh waters?
It's unlikely that.
Why? I mean, I need
their
some-
temperature tolerances, for one. They do need to have an access to salt water in order to breed, to reproduce. And so the likelihood of them leaving, getting in the right area to go and get to the marine waters is low. That's what the biologists believe.
Well, I don't know about it, maybe in Alexandria, but in Terrebonne Parish, they can go from fresh to salt real fast.
Right.
So what type of temperature do they need? Higher temperature, lower temperature?
They
What do
need lower temperature. They can't tolerate as high temperatures as we have here.
What, do you know what the temperature range
I
is?
don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm only because, and do we have any idea, if they were to take hold, what effect they would have on any, native species?
We do have a native species of freshwater shrimp here. Again, the biologists didn't see this as a threat to our native fisheries.
Okay, I'm gonna, I guess, request that you see to it that I get all the biological data on that, because I certainly want to take a look at it. I mean, we've talked about growing things in closed systems before, and it has been widely and roundly opposed. Even though I was in favor of the sturgeon proposal, certainly I want to see that the same discernment is applied to each species. So, and again, we're talking about, oh yeah, you can raise this, you can raise that and sell it. We all know that fancy guppy and that fancy goldfish, at some point, while the person selling it may be under rules and regulations, the person who buys it at some point can decide, I don't want the aquarium, and dump it in the bayou. Okay, so we have to take all that in consideration.
So,
Or we will turn into the Florida Everglades with,
Right.
they have T-Rex down there running around, I think.
Currently, all of those aquarium fish that we're proposed, you are legally able to, in fact, everything on that list, you're able to legally have in this state. You just cannot sell them in a commercial, either for food, or you can't breed them in the aquarium sense. So all of these animals that we presented today are legal for you to possess.
I understand that, but
Right.
I'm saying no matter what it is, no matter how it's raised or sold, we know if we're talking about selling to people, put in aquariums, or just like you sell people snakes, I mean, at some point, they get out into the wild, so we have to use special care. But please get me that data.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes, sir.
If I could make a motion that we set this aside to the next meeting, I would like to do that, make
I
that.
appreciate that. that motion. Is there a
I'll
second? A
it. I'd
second?
like to ask a question.
Yeah, second by Commissioner McPherson. Yes, sir.
Currently, we don't have freshwater prawns being raised in the state.
We have some people that did it before under a special permit. They are currently not doing it now. They have requested, they do have a temporary permit to do so. That's based on past history. It's not something new. It was an experimental type thing. I think Randy Myers issued that permit.
So I didn't quite get the answer.
Yes
So
or
we
no?
have people that are commercially growing.
Currently,
prawns in
she's
the
not,
state,
she doesn't have any shrimp right now. She has in the past. I don't think she's had any shrimp in the past 2 to 3 years.
And in the past, she did it under an experimental permit.
Yes. Right, experimental permit from the
When we
secretary.
put it on this list, we'll basically be authorizing permits for the growth.
Correct, if they meet all the requirements.
You know, I'm kind of like the chair there, you know, these exotics have turned out to be such a disaster in so many instances. And because somebody develops an interest, one person develops an interest in something, we're going to take the risk of the unknown and the unproven. And I kept catching the way you qualified yourself, you know, low risk and low probability. You know, and that's kind of the same thing we looked at with the sturgeon, as the chair pointed out. So, you know, I just don't know if the risk with the value of our aquaculture in the state, you know, to have that, because somebody wants to, they're in the business, they're out of the business. When they go out of the business, what happened? They, you know, you hope that they're cleaning their ponds right and they're getting rid of everything correctly. And
So speaking to the point of exotic species, I am the fisheries aquatic exotic species coordinator, and I appreciate that. And I'm never going to say anything is 100% no risk. The only thing I can say on that is no risk is a rainbow trout, because it won't live past 65, 70 degrees.
shame you can't say that about them white carp. They really kill you when you run them before daylight.
And I appreciate that too. I wish they couldn't live past 70 degrees. I don't think any biologist is going to say there's no risk. The law is put in place for us to review these species and see if there's an acceptable risk to increase the economy of the state through this aquaculture. And that's what the panel did. They reviewed it. They came to an educated conclusion that it is a low risk. And that's why I'm here today. We have denied we've had other species that we didn't allow in.
Yeah, again, it's the balance of what is the economic benefit and what is the rationale as opposed to any risk of another exotic being introduced.
Yep.
Real briefly, and just as I said with the sturgeon, I believe that food scarcity is going to be a problem in the near future for the planet, and I believe in aquaculture. Nonetheless, I just want to have all the facts, and more than just getting out and taking over, also have a concern about susceptibility to different diseases, viruses that could potentially transmit over to our native shrimp, whether the freshwater shrimp or the saltwater shrimp. So I appreciate the motion and the second, and because I just would like more information. Thank you. Any other questions?
One other
Yes,
question.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On freshwater prawns, what species of that prawn? is
It's
it?
listed in your packet. It's Macrobranchium rosenbergi.
I don't see it. but-
It should be in the actual language in the NOI.
Okay. All right, I was just curious because we all know that we have different species.
Right, we have two of them here.
Of the prawn. And I'm a little concerned, just like everyone else. I know they have a big push for aquaculture through federal government programs to get, money, and the federal government's pushing for aquaculture. And I know states beyond Louisiana have already set up shrimp farms with federal funded money, and they're growing, prawns, shrimp, whatever, underneath controlled, environments, especially as far north as Minnesota and Wisconsin. And, it's a little concerning on how those species can be contained and the water discharge coming down the Mississippi, how in the world, because, one thing in the Gulf, we wasn't supposed to ever see black tigers. And here in the Gulf, we have black tigers. That's among our species. And really this department, no one else, we really don't know how many black tigers that we have in our Gulf waters. And we don't know how invasive they have become to actually destroy our own product that we have here. So it is a concern that, all of us should have.
We receive across the Gulf and South Atlantic, very few reports of tigers that have gone down in recent years.
We don't know how they got here. That's the problem.
Correct. Well, we think they came from South Carolina.
Yeah, we think so.
Was a motion to
Put it on.
delay the NOI?
Yes.
Could I make a suggestion in the form of a substitute that we let the NOI proceed forward and just amend it to take the prawns off of it?
I'd like to look at the whole thing, honestly, Joe.
Is there any
a little
reason to move forward? Is a month going to mean anything to your process?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Mhm.
and I won't make a substitute motion.
And just real briefly, the granting of a special permit, that wouldn't create any due process taking issue in the future. Is that permit still extant?
I don't know if it's still valid or not, Rob.
Yeah, it's,
Okay, so the experimental permits, as I understand them and appreciate them, are caveated with this is for experimental purposes and the secretary issues it at his discretion. I would not believe there is a takings issue, but I think it's a good question.
I think maybe we ought to, if we ever grant them again, make that exceptionally clear. With there being no further questions, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Nope, lost my agenda. All right. So, Garrett, our general counsel, for our report on the legislative agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to say good morning, but I do understand what time it is, and I will be as efficient as I can to proceed through this. Like most of the presentations I do, I invite y'all to interrupt me at any time and ask any questions or make any comments. So this is something I do for every year about this time when the legislature is about to go into session. This is actually a pretty short presentation because pre-file deadline does not occur until tomorrow. And this is a fiscal session with every member having only 5 general bills, non-fiscal bills to file. So I don't anticipate there being a whole lot of legislation filed, but I will go through some of the important ones that have either been filed or that are planning to be filed. And I will start with our own license restructure, license simplification, fee adjustment bill. You've heard plenty about it. Renee Lebreton gave you all a great introduction on how we're not recruiting as many folks as we would like to into hunting and fishing, how we've got an aging population that are achieving the reduced senior license fees. And for a myriad of different reasons, we are expending more than what we're bringing in revenue as an agency. Those have led to some of the issues that you heard Undersecretary McClinton talk about from a customer service standpoint. We recognize those, and this would be an opportunity for us to try to get the tools we need to continue the services and the programs and provide those to the people of the Sportsman's Paradise. This will give me a segue into just straight up stealing my colleague's presentation. Undersecretary McClinton has prepared this. Many of you have seen it individually. I did want to run through it here in a public forum so that the public can be aware of what the bill, when it is eventually filed, will look like. As I mentioned, it is a comprehensive license restructure. It deals with recreational, commercial, and boat registration. The general background on this is the black line on top is where our conservation fund is. The blue line that you see with the red arrow pointing to it is mineral revenue coming off of our owned or managed properties. The gray line that's third there is recreational license revenues. The yellow line is vessel registration, and the reddish orange line there is our commercial fishing license sales. All of these going into our conservation fund, which serves as our lifeblood, our basis of operations for this agency. The main point to this slide is how dependent we are on those mineral revenues, and towards the tail end of that graph, you'll see where they are at now. We went from a height of about $75 million in revenues from minerals annually. There in the middle of that slide, that would be in around 2013 or 14. We are now anticipating mineral revenue being $13 million or less per year. And this is just to show you the monthly deposits and the decline over time, and now getting down to that the 1 million per month, $12 to $13 million annually on mineral deposits. So one of the things you saw in Renee's presentation was that we did have what we're calling the COVID uptick for recreational fishing licenses. That's great. We'd love to see more users out there. That does generate a small amount more money for us. But if you look in the top left, those are the recreational licenses sold. The largest number we've ever received from that is about $18.5 million. And even with the uptick there in the last portion, you've got a downward trend, a slight uptick, and now you're receiving 16 and some change. Conversely, the royalties on the land, as I mentioned, is on a much larger scale. You've got $70 million coming down to 13. So even in the best year, if we were to sell more licenses than we've ever sold before, and we say sell $20 million worth, that doesn't make up for the $60 million reduction in royalties that we're receiving. And that's what the middle chart's supposed to show. When you combine the two, there's still a steady downward trend in revenue for this agency. So why is that? Well, I'll get back to the R3 presentation that y'all had before. The top number is total number of fishing privileges on your left and total number of hunting privileges on your right. The darker line that is under that top line is the individual basic licenses that we sell. Those are your annual customers that come to you every year. You can see the disparity there. So even though there's a number of licenses that are being sold, we are actually collecting a full fee from the individuals at a much lower rate. And the two lines under that are the reason why. The top one is the senior combo license, which is $5 currently. We have this cohort of hunters and fishers that are aging into that senior group. That's great, but instead of getting the basic license revenue from them, we are now selling them a combo license for $5. The lower line you see that has also got a steady upward trend is our lifetime licenses. Again, love that people are getting those, going out hunting and fishing, utilizing the resource, but they are no longer a customer once they buy those. So that is how we get here, which is our fiscal status. The top line in orange is what our conservation fund balance is. The line in yellow is our revenues each year. I will just point out to you that in 15 and 16, it was about 75 million. Now we're projecting about 40 million. Again, that is directly tied to a reduction in mineral revenue and an aging population, an increase in those lifetime licenses, less annual people coming to our windows. Expenditures, I'm happy to report, are remaining fairly constant. We started there with $73 million. They ooched up to 76 million in 17 or 18, and we have got them down below 70 last year and have held them right at $70 million for this current fiscal year. We are projecting to keep this reduced expenditure moving forward at $72.5 million, even though the legislature has appropriated $78 million for our budget. So I guess the real bottom line here is when we came with the license restructure in 2018, we were faced with two sets of criticisms. One, it was only focused on the recreational license holders. It was not dealing with boat registration or commercial. And then two, hey, y'all have money in your account. At that time, we had an $83 million fund balance. We were trying to be proactive. We saw the trends. We were trying to get out in front of this, make a minor adjustment so that we could, extend in until mineral revenue got back up, or, we could get some other additional revenue sources. Nevertheless, we don't have that cushion anymore. That big circle you see for fiscal year 22-23 is a zero. And that is a negative number leading into it. So I know the general budget has already been presented. We are asking for $17 million in state general fund money to bridge this gap for the upcoming fiscal year. This is to highlight the fund balance in red going down, the expenditures in blue staying steady. This is to show that this is not an expenditure issue. This is a revenue issue. When you hold one thing steady and your fund balance continues to go down, that's a lack of revenue. That's the 2018 year when we brought our last bill. And one of the ways that we're reducing expenditures, holding expenditures steady, is we're not filling positions. You can see this trend. As Brian mentioned, we're down 150 plus warm bodies since Secretary Monasey took office. And that's our total filled positions and the reduction in staff that we've made trying to reduce expenditures. And why is holding staff not filling positions important? Well, this is a pie chart. Please don't worry about all the numbers that are on there. That's kind of busy. But what I'd like to point out here is the largest slice of that pie deals with personnel services. That is salaries, that is related benefits. Those are people. That is 72% of expenditures in this agency. There's another 14%, the second largest slice of that pie, that goes to other agencies, to risk management, to Office of Civil Service, to technology services. These are things that we are required to pay for them to perform the functions as state agencies. So those two combined for an 86% are what we consider to be non-discretionary expenditures. Where we have been able to cut, we have. So you look at travel, you look at operating services, supplies, personnel, professional services contracts. All of those have red numbers beside them because we, again, saw where we were headed, tried to reduce expenditures. Using those discretionary portions, the 14% that we are able to do, we made cuts, and pretty drastic cuts, as you can tell by the percentage numbers. Nevertheless, if we were to cut all of those to zero, we would still have a revenue problem. We would not be able to pull ourselves out of this fiscal nosedive. Compounding, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner McPherson.
Yes, go ahead.
Explain, Cole, on the salaries. Salaries in the period, even though we reduced all those employees, still went up 8%. I understand raises and stuff.
That's precisely it. The cost of living adjustment that is I guess mandated by civil service, even with reducing that staff, has only increased salaries by 8%, even though we've reduced them. But you look at the related benefits, they've actually increased by 16%. And that's because many of those people that we did not fill positions retired, which means we're still paying for their retirement and we're still paying for their health benefits. I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
So in addition to trying to continue the services and programs that we've had and kind of the core missions that Wildlife and Fisheries does, here's a list of all the things that we've added since 2001. I will spare you going through all of them, but it has to do a lot with introduction of invasive species, feral hogs, giant salvinia. It has to do with additional monitoring from BP oil spill and seafood safety. Our enforcement division is now tasked with leading search and rescue missions in the state. None of this was in effect or part of our core mission in 2001. I'm not here to tell you that any of them are not important, but it's just here as an example of trying to do more with less and at values of license fees that haven't been adjusted in 35 or 20 years. So along those lines, I'll mention that our recreational licenses have not been changed since the year 2000. This is a look of the United States of America, every other fish and wildlife agency, and when they changed their licenses. We are the furthest back, with the exception of those states that you see with stars. And we'll point out that Pennsylvania looks like their hunting was in 1999. The reason those states have stars is because all of those states receive some sort of tax, general fund money, or other revenue source besides license. They are not strictly user fee based. And so they have the luxury to keep their licenses static from those time periods when they were, because they're receiving those additional revenues. So I'll jump into, this is not necessarily just a fee bill. This is a simplification. This is an opportunity to take these 117 licenses that you see here and turn them into something much more simplistic, like what you see here. This is our recreational license proposal. I will tell you the methodology behind it, which was to look at what the cost, the CPI, the inflation would have been from the year 2000, and then make sure to compare that to the neighboring Gulf states and make sure that there is nothing that is going to be so far that's outrageous or that falls outside of kind of what those Gulf states are charging for their privileges. This does simplify a lot of things. You'll notice that there's no longer an archery or primitive firearm license. If you want to go deer hunting, you get your deer hunting license, you go deer hunting with any legal means. You don't need to get recreational gear for buckets or hoop nets or crawfish traps or anything like that. All of those are included in your licenses. So many people who like to use those types of gear or do lots of different types of hunting will actually save money through this. You'll notice that our Sportsman's Paradise, the kind of all everything combo, has not changed. It's currently $100. It continues to be $100. So I guess I don't want to go through and read every line of these. Just trying to point out the high points, the non-residence fees. You'll see 4 times multipliers on those for the most part. And your we created a 5-day license as opposed to our current 1 and 3 days. That's to get people here to spend money in our economy, to support our local coastal communities, to go to the duck camp, to buy food at grocery stores. We know what we do for this state as far as tourism and as far as driving the economy. It's over a $10 billion industry between what recreational and commercial brings into this state alone. And so we want to be able to maximize the amount of time people can stay here and boost our economy. You will notice that the lifetime licenses are continue to be here. That's much to Undersecretary McClinton's dismay, but we do understand people like to have that. And so it is here, but it has been adjusted so that we can no longer continue to get fleeced on those lifetime privileges. And I'm guilty of it too. I bought my son a infant lifetime license for his first Christmas because it is a heck of a deal. The final thing I'll add, and this is something that you'll see going into the commercial as well, is we are a user fee based department. We are trying to make it to where we're reinvesting what people provide us in license fees back into those things that they're passionate about. So your saltwater license fee is going to have money reinvested back into the LaCreel program and management of those species. The charter license fees, a good portion is going to go back into ensuring compliance and making sure that they have the advertisements that they need to bring people to the state. Duck hunting is going to go both to managing breeding grounds as well as native habitat. So this is a common theme, is not only a simplification, but a reinvestment of those fees back into what people are passionate about pursuing. Second prong of this is a boat registration restructure. On your left, you'll see the myriad of licensing by the foot, I call it, which is what we do now, registration by the foot. We've taken all those by the foot fees, we've compiled them into Coast Guard classes and said, if you're a Class A, this is your 3-year registration. If you're a Class 1, this is your 3-year registration. You'll notice that the new fees fall right in line with where each of those vessel registrations are currently. The beauty of this is we're going to dedicate $5 million of revenue from vessel registration and put it into the Aquatic Plant Control Fund. I don't have to tell y'all in this room because y'all hear from legislators and constituents the same way we do. Aquatic plants are a huge problem in this state. And it's one that with our reduced funding right now, we have not been able to keep up with. It accounts for a quarter of Mr. Banks's fisheries budget right now. This will provide us an opportunity every year, July 1, $5 million in the bank to go attack this issue that's keeping people from the water, keeping people from recreating, keeping commercial fishermen from being able to trawl and access those waters.
So what are we spending now?
Well, we have spent as much as $6.5 million between state and federal funds. And I should mention that this $5 million is just the state portion. We would continue to get that about $1.5 million from the feds. However, in recent years, that expenditure has not been as great because Patrick still has to go and make sure that we're sampling the species we need to be sampling. We have core value mission. So I'll let him answer how much it has been in the last year or two.
And that was close to, actually, I would say in fiscal year 2017, we spent just over 7 million total on aquatic weed control. And as Cole mentioned, a little bit shy of 2 million was federal. So the rest of that was from the conservation fund at that time, which of course we don't have the luxury of using anymore. So.
Right. Well, I was named about a week and a half ago, and I've already had numerous phone calls and text messages about Salvinia, so up in our area.
Another important component of this boat registration that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because it is going to be something new, is the paddlecraft registration. This would apply to kayaks, pirogues, canoes, anything that someone uses a paddle to propel. We're proposing a $15 registration for those vessels, but it's for the lifetime of that ownership. And what we're noticing is this is becoming a very popular thing. I myself own 2 kayaks, but our enforcement agents, and y'all hear the reports, we find boater deaths with kayaks. We find kayaks in the marsh. We don't know if we're supposed to be doing a search and rescue mission or if it blew off of somebody's dock. These things are pretty easy to carry around, so they go missing a lot. You get a lot of issues with theft, and without having the ability to tie a HIN number to a registered owner, we can serve no help to the public when they're trying to recover something that belonged to them that may have grew legs. So I think there is a value to the people of Louisiana, both from a safety standpoint, but also from an ownership standpoint, that this will be good for. The reason we're able to do a lifetime license registration on those and not the motorboats is the Coast Guard requires 3-year renewals on motorized vessels. They do not require that for paddlecraft. And so we wanted to give that value for the life of ownership. Yes, ma'am.
But if somebody, I'm assuming, let's say I have a pirogue, I register it, then I sell the pirogue, that person would have to go re-register?
Correct. That's why it's for the lifetime of your ownership. Yes.
Not the lifetime of the pirogue.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
And I will also state, if you're paddling around in your private pond or in your subdivision, any non-navigable waterway, registration is not necessary. If you want the protection of having that proof of ownership or evidence of ownership, by all means, but this is only for those vessels that are going to be used upon the public waters. All right. Which brings me to our commercial restructure, and I know that this is a small window, so I'm going to go ahead and enhance it so y'all can go through it with me here. What we try to do is the same thing that I was emphasizing on the recreational licenses. So the things that the industries that they're paying fees into, are redirected into those industries. So you've got in your blue, your general commercial licenses. Oop, they don't like me being zoomed in, I guess. In your blue, you got your general commercial licenses. Those are all going towards conservation fund, general enforcement. I'm sorry. I don't know why it keeps kicking me out of Zoom. From there, you've got your species-specific gear fees, which are these, pink being shrimp, green being crab, blue being crawfish, yellow being oyster. All of those species-specific fees are going to be 100% reinvested into those industries. It's going to be for the promotion, for the marketing, for the management and enforcement of those species. So if Lieutenant Colonel Zecchinelli has people out there opening day of oyster season or shrimp season, they can charge their time to that they are enforcing that industry. If Patrick's guys are pulling seines in preparation for opening a shrimp season, they can charge their time for that. This just gives us, it makes sure that the industries, the fees that they're paying are not just going to something else in the agency. They're going to be reinvested in the management, the enforcement, or the promotion of that industry. It's identical with saltwater finfish and freshwater fish. I guess just in general, you'll see these $50 gear licenses being proposed. That's up from $25 current price. So I did present this to the Shrimp Task Force yesterday, and they had some comments. I understand this is a proposal, but we're searching for a way to solve a pretty financial situation with this agency.
Madam Chairman.
Oh, yes, sir.
Can I speak?
Commissioner, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on that, yesterday we had a timely discussion on the Shrimp Task Force on the commercial side. And just so everyone knows on our commission right here, the commercial sector, the license fee actually went up about 150 to 200% on it. And what the guys on the task force, what we come is, we are dying industry right here. The commercial side of this and what we kind of stated is that the department just can't look at the commercial side anymore to lead the pack to get it out of the mess that it's, not that it's created, but because of the general fund being, wiped out. So, because oyster fishermen are going down, shrimp fishermen, crab fishermen, everybody that's in the commercial side is going down. So, they did have some debate over these license fees because of the significant increase on the commercial side, being that even though it's, user friendly, when the money's going to go back, we have less fishermen now, we have less commercial fishing boats now than what we did in 2015 when we had 30,000 boats. Now we only have 5,000 boats. So the department doesn't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to police the commercial side. We already got drones in place to police the shrimp industry and the oyster industry. And, they can use them drones for whatever, right there. But, it was some concern on this amount. They do it, realize they need to pay something, but they can't carry the full burden of the license structure anymore because of the default of the industry. And every one of them is agreeing within 2 to 5 years, we may not have a shrimp industry at all in the state of Louisiana. So we have to be looking at something completely different for, licensing structure, because the handwriting's on the wall already for us. We don't get much support from our delegation directly in the state of Louisiana and support for our shrimp industry. And then when it's going to be gone, they're going to say, well, what the heck happened, to our industry? And we've been trying to tell everyone for 20 years now what's going on. And the handwriting's on the wall, we on the way out, and somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack if they want to keep up the department right here. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I certainly concur with a lot of the comments you had.
And I think that's a good segue to my next slide here, and I appreciate the stance of the Shrimp Task Force, and I heard what they had to say yesterday. Allow me to, I guess, justify why those increases to the individual commercial licenses seem, higher than what is being applied to the recreational ones. It's the problem, the issue is twofold. One, it's been since 1985 since the commercial licenses have been adjusted. If you simply look at inflation over that time period, that's 145% over inflation. So that's one issue why those adjustments look like they're greater than what's happening on the recreational proposal. The second is there's only 10,000 licensed commercial fishermen versus the 650,000 fishers and the 300,000 hunters that we have. So an adjustment to such a small amount is going to result in larger individual license fees than being spread out over just the sheer number of recreational members. So that is the reason why the proposal looks the way it does. I hear what the Shrimp Task Force and Commissioner Blanchard are saying. I am not disregarding those comments. I was just merely trying to tell you why the proposal looks the way it does. So what you see in this slide is current funding, how much each sector provides into the conservation fund versus with a revised model. You're looking at $11 million in additional revenue coming from the recreational license adjustment, $4 additional million coming from the commercial license adjustment, and $2 additional million coming from boat registration. The other compensation and the minerals, of course, stay static because those are not license fee related. So that's a $17 million increase, assuming the proposal is successful as it is. If you paid attention to my first couple of slides, you realize that this is a $38 million problem. That's the gap between our revenues and expenditures right now. Even as potentially objectionable as some people may find these fees, I just want everybody to be clear and understand this fixes half the problem. This isn't a full solvency model. So understand that the department is really sensitive and knows that we have to get something that is palatable that people can accept, and we don't want to place that burden on our users. But by the same token, we have made a lot of concessions, at least in regards to what the problem is and our ability to fix it. So that's where we stand right now. I will not.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes, Commissioner Sincere.
Thank you very much. I want to just, while I understand these increases are significant and we'll all feel them somewhat. I've been working at my family business now for 43 years. And I've seen increases in everything that I do, from occupational licenses to state agency licenses that I have to operate, to federal licenses that I have to get. And when you look at 1985 and 2021, and the increases we're looking at, what the value of a dollar is today, and then what services that are being provided and have to be provided by this department, I'm going to have to just say that I'm going to speak in support of the license increases based on just my 43 years of being in business. And I'm going to tell you, my property taxes have gone up far more than these types of licenses. As from my licenses to operate have gone up far more. I mean, my services, my surge and water, all these things, when you look at it percentage wise, This is minuscule in comparison to all those other charges. And look, I don't want to pay another nickel for anything, especially this past year. I haven't been getting paid for the last few months because I can't afford to pay myself. I'm not here crying about it, but I know what it means to operate a business, and this is a business that the state operates. And, with the combination of these increases, as well as the ability to be able to get funding from the general funds, hopefully we can encourage the legislature to move forward to see the necessity of having to do this. So thank you for letting me speak on this, but I had to say it. I'm not in favor of increase, but I know where we stand and what has to be done based on the time frame that it's been since we've had increases. Thank you very much, Madam
Thank you,
Chairperson.
Commissioner McPherson.
I think we all recognize that it's important. I carried the water on the cane pole license bill and the senior bill, and primarily with the argument of the federal funds that would come down. The only way we were successful back then was to have the user groups in support. And I assume y'all have done your work to try to get their support, and you're going to have them at the table and all, basically user fees. The users have to be willing to accept them and to take them, and it becomes important. I think I'd be remiss if, when we went through those funding battles back then, and you're the attorney to look this up, but I think I passed a bill that mandated that the department every 5 years submit to the legislature a report where we're at on fee structures and all, to where we didn't go with these huge lapses and have to ask for such a large bite of the apple every time we did it.
That's right.
But if that law is there,
It is.
and are we in compliance with
We
it?
are. So that we consider the annual report that we submit to the committees as well as to the governor's office contains that information. We probably could do a better job of highlighting compliance of that and provide, specific reports to the legislature. I mean, I will say.
Well, as an author, and we know how it works. The way you just said it, probably it doesn't come to any legislator's attention. Lucky if it comes to the budget analyst's attention. I think the intent at the time was you went before the committees and you made a presentation just like this and you laid it out.
Yes, sir.
And that's not happening now.
Well, I will say, for the past, since 2018, certainly Secretary Montesay and Undersecretary McClinton in every budget meeting that they have talk about the path is coming. Here, license restructure is something that we think is at least a part of a solution. So that has been being done, but I do agree with you. There is a legislative instrument out there that allows us to at least make the committees aware.
Yeah. Thank you.
Understood. I guess piggybacking on what Commissioner Sinceri said, I don't take great pleasure in standing here asking the public or you guys to support raising fees. I would love people to be able to utilize the resource for a minimum amount, but with minerals being what they are and to maintain the programs, the services, it costs money. So I appreciate everybody's sentiments on this, and thank you for listening to the license restructure.
I got one more question. Madam Chair, can I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. One more question that was brought to my attention that, and this is what, that kind of gets, to me is we need to be fair on everybody. But like on a recreation charter boat 3-day fishing license, it's only $10.
Currently.
It's like, sure, we got people in the state that, we enjoy fishing, that's all right, but we're gonna let other people come in and just fish for free, basically. So that's some of the stuff that I think that needs to be really looked at some kind of way, that code.
So the proposal is to jump that up to a $20 fee for a 3-day
I'm not even
license.
proposing, I'm just saying, let's be fair, right there. That's all I'm saying is, because I don't think that's a fair shake right there. but.
Understood, and I'd love to, y'all will have the opportunity to talk to myself or Undersecretary McClinton about any of these proposals. We're here to receive information and thoughts on it, but I just wanted to point out that fee is proposed to be doubled under the proposal. I think I spent enough time on the licensure structure. And again, the reason why it's not listed as one of these bills as part of my presentation is because it has not been filed yet, but I wanted to provide you and the public the opportunity to show what the proposal is going to look like when it is filed. That brings me into some bills that have been filed. Again, pre-file deadline is not until tomorrow, so I expect more bills to be rolling in. But here are some that were filed that deals with wildlife and fisheries specifically. Representative now Reiser has a bill that prohibits the harvest of cypress trees on state property. It's currently illegal for any non-state entity to come on, trespass, and cut a cypress tree, and there's serious civil penalties that come along with that. This would actually expand that prohibition to anybody, state agencies, state lands office, members of the public, timber companies, whomever. And his reasoning is cypress trees are important in the state, and I want to preserve every one that I can. So he was kind enough to reach out to us, let us know he was going to file it. We explained to him our timber management processes, and I believe we're going to work on some language to allow us to maintain trails and servitudes on our property. But that's where that one stands. There's House Bill 366. This is by Representative McFarland. He was approached by a member of one of his constituents who's interested in a land swap where wildlife and fisheries would swap 152 acres for around 220 acres. This is on the Russell Sage WMA. Of course, I want to caveat this with this bill authorizes us to negotiate, appraise, and perform due diligence. It does not mandate that we engage in this. It just says y'all can enter into these negotiations with this individual. I don't know much more about it than that, but that's what the bill does. Finally, for wildlife, HB 154 addresses many trust funds within the state, but three of which are important to us, which is the Russell Sage, Rockefeller Trust, and Marsh Island funds. Currently, right now, the treasurer is only allowed to invest 35% of those trust funds into stocks. This would allow for a, I guess, more aggressive portfolio and allow for up to 65% of those to be invested into stocks. So that's potentially going to create more revenue for those trust funds and the management of those specific properties that they're tied to. In previous years, the public access bills have been something that's been very hotly contested. This year, at least as of now, there's only one public access bill that's been filed, and that is a constitutional amendment. And it does two things. It allows the state to enter into agreements with landowners to establish permanent fixed boundaries between navigable waterways and privately claimed property. The other thing it does is allow the state to accept via donation surface rights with the perpetual reservation of minerals. And so long as those donations allow for not only access, public access to those water bodies, but any future erosion or, erosion that would create new navigable waterways. The reason this is a constitutional amendment and not just a bill is because both of those things could presumably be viewed as a impermissive donation of a thing that the state owns or claims. And it's just a way to address what is a dynamic and eroding coastline and avoid scenarios like you see above, which recreational fishermen or duck hunters or charter boat fishermen find themselves in a water body they think is navigable, and there is a private landowner who holds title to that property and believes that they are trespassing.
Wait, Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
Does this basically change the public trust law some kind of way?
I don't believe it changes the public trust law. You know, the state is still entrusted with the public resources, including the water bottoms and the fish and wildlife within the state. What this does is creates a legal methodology to establish boundaries and settle disputes so that the public is aware of where they can go and where they can't go. I spoke to the author yesterday about it, and I was sat on the task force that was came up with several different prongs on how to address this particular problem, and this is one of those prongs. But in my opinion, it's a first step to create a legal mechanism.
So if there's eroding land that becomes navigable and it's not been protected by the landowner, that means that it will be retained by the landowner even though it becomes navigable?
So what you're describing depends exactly on how the settlement agreement comes out. What this bill does is says, state, you are now authorized to enter into those negotiations and to establish a boundary to create that. How that deal gets done or what it looks like, I have no idea.
I guess it would just be you'd need to look at the language in the statute, but the state has plenty of ability to enter into negotiated boundary settlements currently.
I think this has everything to do with retention of minerals. So when the state enters into those boundary settlements, they can't just give away the minerals that underlie the surface. And so this is twofold. I think if it was just a surface rights issue, this probably would be less of a problem. You'd have many willing coastal landowners that said, yeah, public access is great. But because they're trying to protect their underlying minerals, they feel like it's necessary for them to either protect the surface, have somebody operating on their behalf to preserve that claim. I believe it's a subsurface issue, even more than it's a surface issue, Commissioner McPherson.
Well, if I may, I would just say if that is the case, then I would hope that would be this department's position, that it be strictly for mineral rights rather than for navigational purposes.
So I will tell you what the department's position has been on all of these public access bills, and I don't expect that to change, which is we are in favor of people utilizing the fish and wildlife resources of the state, but not to the detriment of private property rights. And I think that that's going to be a phrase that you hear me say anytime I'm asked about something. So if we can enter into we, the state, the royal we, can preserve or establish some added public access, I think that we would be in favor of that, but it all depends on what the deal looks like, right? So it's this will be a hotly debated and robustly discussed bill, I'm sure.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just one question. This is a 70 vote in the House?
Yes, a constitutional amendment does require a 2/3 vote.
Okay.
And then, of course, that's just to put it on a vote to the people on referendum.
Right. Okay.
So point well taken, long process ahead. 3 fisheries bills that I wanted to highlight that have been filed as of 10 o'clock last night. One deals with the Fishermen's Gear Compensation Fund that was scheduled to sunset in June 30th of 2022. This bill would extend that through 2026 and also provide $250,000 in funding annually to the Underwater Obstruction Fund. So this fund kind of serves 2 purposes. It has money to remove underwater obstructions that have been identified. And it's also got another component that pays fishermen for, they call it the hang fund, when they've torn nets or lost equipment on an unmarked underwater obstruction. And to be clear, DNR operates that fund and they are the ones who would administer it. So this is not a wildlife and fisheries fund, even though it certainly has a commercial fisherman component to it. Another fun one that has a history that's embedded with this commission, although no one here was on it when this action was taken, but it's HB 226. It deals with crappie limits in Lake D'Arbonne. There was a commissioner named Mr. Ronnie Graham who served on this commission. He believed that 50 fish limit in Lake D'Arbonne was too much. He urged his fellow commissioners to reduce that limit to 25. When he did, there was some legislators in his area that thought that that wasn't such a good idea. And legislation was passed to say the commission has kind of general authority to adjust creel limits that are set in statute. But they said, look, if you're going to adjust this one, you need to show that not only it's a good idea, but that to not do so would be detrimental to the population. And so that limitation, that further restriction was put into statute based on some commission action that was taken several years ago. What this bill would do is just undo that and return kind of the ability of the commission to manage creel limits using the best available science and under the ways that y'all do that with other species now. And the final one, SB 134 would prohibit nighttime shrimping in Lake Pontchartrain. There's several water bodies out there right now that prohibit nighttime trawling, and this would add Lake Pontchartrain west of I-10 to that list.
Okay.
Nope, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner
Do you know the impetus of this, that last?
I don't.
piece? Okay.
I don't. I can
Thank
tell
you.
you it's Senator Lambert's bill, but I would hesitate to speak on his behalf.
Okay, thank you.
I just, all these bills were filed and I did a search yesterday and found them. Three final ones, Madam Chairman. I know we're ready to split here.
I
HB.
thought you said, when you said the last one, I thought you
Oh,
meant
fisheries.
the last
Oh,
one.
fisheries. I got to
But you
choose.
meant the fourth to last.
Yeah, the
All right.
penultimate one. I got to choose my words more carefully. There are three enforcement bills, and then that will conclude my presentation. House Bill 118 is the Louisiana Firearm Protection Act, and it does a lot of things. It kind of reiterates the Second Amendment rights of Louisiana firearm owners, and it says that a state cannot enforce federal laws that tax or register or any way curtails the possession of firearms. And one important piece of language in here that I found very, I guess, comforting was it does exempt the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration funding, because as you're aware, all of our wildlife restoration funds comes from an excise tax on firearms and ammunition. It exempts that. So this prohibition of taxation would not include that. So we would still have those federal funds. Nevertheless, it's something that I want to keep a close eye on. The other thing that it may have an issue with us on is it prohibits enforcement of federal law or regulation that's inconsistent with the state law. So you've got this very strict state law that says you cannot chill or curtail the ownership of firearms. Obviously, our enforcement agents are duly commissioned to enforce state and federal law. If there comes an issue where there's a federal law that is, inconsistent with state law, that may put us in a position where we're not really sure what we are able to do. So again, this is more of I'm watching this bill to see kind of what
So
happens.
they're not prohibiting federal law, they're prohibiting the enforcement of federal.
Yes, and the funding for that enforcement and all of that. And so then you get into, well, we get $2 million-ish for JEA funds, Joint Enforcement Activity Funds. And are we going to leave those on the table if we've got a state law that says you can't do what you're supposed to?
Who introduced that?
It's a myriad of representatives.
That's okay.
Fryman, I believe, is
I can
the
look it
lead author on it, but there's several co-authors on it too. Another one that you'll see that we have one of our cadets picture on here, Emmanuel Washington. He had passed away going through our training program several years ago from a heart attack that he suffered during the strenuous activity. And so we actually brought a bill a couple of years ago to address his survival benefits. We believe that we took care of that. I've got him back on here because someone else is bringing a bill specifically geared towards heart attacks and strokes for law enforcement officers that are suffered in the line of duty. And so mainly just wanted, as an ode to him and his family and kind of a remembrance of him, bring him on here, but also his situation would have been one that this law would have addressed. So that's there. And then the final one, which does not have a bill number, but it is something the department has approached an author about, is the conversion of certain criminal violations to civil fines. As you know, all of our violations right now are criminal in nature. They're all processed and handed to the DAs for prosecution. The prosecution rates have not been great. And on top of that, there's supposed to be $7 that come back for every valid prosecution to the agency to invest in certain funds. We don't see a lot of return on that. So for that reason, to make sure that the lower level crimes are being enforced, to decriminalize some of these lower level criminal violations. Do I think that somebody who doesn't wear a life vest should be given a criminal citation? Probably not. That's a good civil fine type thing. So it's taking these lower level criminal citations, doing some criminal justice reform, converting them to civil fines, and will provide our agency the ability not only to receive the benefit of those fines, but to educate the public on these matters. So that's a bill that has not yet been filed, but I expect for it to be filed before tomorrow's pre-file deadline. And with that, Madam Chairman, I will take any questions.
Simple fines go when they were collected.
They would be going into the conservation fund.
Any further questions? All right.
Thank you so much for your
Mr.
time.
Garrett. Commission meeting date for, why does it say for calendar year? Oh, that was you, Joe.
Yeah.
Set up in advance.
Yeah. Well.
First Thursday of every month is 9:30 unless we change it.
All right. Is that a motion, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
All
it
opposed?
doesn't change the venue. The venue can change.
Everything can change. but
That's
in
correct. This
general-
is setting date and time, and then we'll address the venue as we put out the agenda.
Right.
Let's explain it a bit better.
All right, and any public comment?
Yes, I apologize.
Go
Talk about
ahead.
your swims.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Miss Susan, did we look at holidays around that? Because I thought part of the deal where we were gonna, I guess we can look at it later.
We can look at it on a case-by-case, month-by-month basis.
The chair will.
Thank you, Commissioner. Personal matter, I want to thank my daughter, Mackenzie, my hunting and fishing buddy, for being here with me throughout the whole meeting. I know I'm probably embarrassing her, but I really appreciate it.
Mackenzie to
Stand
stand up.
up. She's gonna sink into the floor. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.